You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Wellborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Dude, thanks for making the trip to Austin. I feel like we've been pen pals and friends for a long time, so it's great to meet you in person.
Nice too. Thanks for having me.
When Rob Wolf introduced us, he said,
I forgot.
He said, Coach Sommers can be prickly. And I don't feel that at all. I feel like Rob was throwing me a curveball.
No, he saw me. How to explain? I respect professionalism. I respect good intent. I respect best effort. And I completely disrespect bullshit. And so Rob's seen some people try to lay bullshit on me, and he's seen me hold them accountable. So I'm sure that's where that came from.
Well, I'm just being honest and accountable. Doesn't seem like a prickly person, but Rob's like, he can be a little prickly. And I was like, really? And so
direct. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
not as smooth and sensitive as I should be.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're confident in your abilities and you know what you know, and it sounds like you don't suffer fools.
I don't. But I don't. I've never understood people getting upset with that, because if you want to be a stud, you want to be great, you want someone to be straight with you. Don't sugarcoat it. I'm screwing up. Tell me I'm screwing up. If there's a better way, tell me. You can prove it to me. I'll throw aside what I'm doing right now and take yours, 100%.
Sure.
But I see a lot of people that won't. They kind of get vested interest. They paint themselves into a corner. This is who I am.
Sure.
Rather than, I want to be the best. Period.
Power Athlete, my company, I've long said it is built on performance, and I'm a performance whore. So if there's something that I can add to the equation that allows me to be better, why wouldn't I bring it on?
100%.
And if I'm so rigid in my philosophy and what I'm doing and I can't see a better way, now all I'm doing is just selling magic, and I'm not really adhering to performance.
It's always the wannabes. I'm going to hurt feelings, but it's always the wannabes who are rigid. This is my way. It's the only way. There is no other way. I'm the second coming of whatever. No. Anybody who's been at a world-class level knows that any advantage you have in an approach, in a technique, in a protocol is temporary, because they're going to see what you're doing. They're going to dissect it, and they're going to implement it, which is good, because then it pushes you to do more. But it's only the wannabes who think, yeah, I've got the final answer. And they haven't competed at a high enough level to know, no, that's not the case at all. Everyone's just looking for that sliver of an edge, and if you're dogmatic, you're done.
Yeah. Well, if you get stuck in, this is the only philosophy, this is the only way I can do things, that's where I feel like that's a slow death.
100%. And they're no longer relevant. It's kind of like I'll see a coach, and he might get lucky. He just happened to have inherited a phenom, and this kid was going to be good regardless. And so you kind of look for, is he a one-hit wonder? Does he have, do we have a history of excellence? He probably knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. He had one, maybe. I'll wait and see. Sit down, chat. What do you got going on? Sometimes these poor kids, they survive in spite of this guy they're working with.
Yeah. Sounds like every NFL strength coach, not to throw shade at them, but when you take the world's best athletes, all you have to do is implement a training system that doesn't hurt them.
Yeah.
So, and I have a ton of NFL strength coaching friends, but it really comes down to, you take the world's best athletes, all you have to do is make sure that they don't get injured in the weight room. Don't hurt them. Yeah, don't hurt them. I mean, how much do you really have to improve them? I mean, if they want to improve, but for the most part, the skills they come in, way different than in college. Like, I showed up in college at 18 years old, and with so far physically, just maturity wise, there's guys that are 23 that have beards, and I didn't even own a razor. And then showing up in the NFL, it's a little bit different. I came in and started. Like the difference between 18 and 23 is much different than 23, 24, and 30. It's just physical difference.
I'm content. So we've had Marquette back in the day. Their strength coach was implementing our stuff for GymnasticBodies. They made Final 8 or Elite 8, whatever it's called for basketball for the first time. He's pumped. We've had, we've had 3 NHL guys came in. They were pumped. They felt better. They're performing. And I was surprised how unsophisticated prep was at a pro level. It was just kind of like, well, I read an article. You guys go. It's like, well, where's your rhyme or reason? Where are your metrics of performance? How do you know if you're improving or not? Oh, they put more weight on the bars. Yeah, but you're not a lifter. You're an athlete. Yeah. Are you faster? Can you jump higher? Are you slower? Yeah. They don't look at any of that.
Well, if the training doesn't, the analogy I give my guys is, you guys are all, let's say you guys are all warriors. You guys are all killers. I come in, the training has to sharpen your blade. And if you 100%. Go out there and you don't cut smoother and it's not faster and it's more lethal, then we got to figure this thing out a little bit. I'm not giving you, I'm not forging you a blade. I'm not giving you a sword. I'm here to sharpen your blade. Now you have to learn how to use it, and I have to make sure that the tool is ready. But at the end of the day, you have to go out and use it to effectively cut heads off. We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Are you a field or court sport athlete looking to dominate the leaderboard? Let me introduce you to FieldStrong. Take your inner athlete to the next level by exposing yourself to the advanced training techniques that contributed to my 10 years in the NFL. Unlock pinnacle performance and level up your athletic potential today. Head to powerathletehq.com/FieldStrong and claim your 7-day free trial. Now back to the show.
100%. I see all the time these coaches saying, you can't be too strong. I'm like, well, you've obviously never performed at a world-class level, right? Because you can definitely get to the point where your strength's interfering. So Alan was alternate for Tokyo, but way back when he was 12, national champ, he's stronger than our 18-year-olds on national team. But I'm watching him and he's getting slow. He's kind of like a tree sloth going up the rope. I should say it was a year before he won nationals. So I came home and I was like, wow, I pushed strength too far. I pushed it too far. So I changed everything. Instead of resisted handstand push-ups, it was all hopping handstand push-ups. It was not weighted ropes. It was all hopping rope climbs. Everything was plyometric. Yeah. And
rate of force development.
Rate of force. And that was the year that just an easy, smooth nationals crushed everyone. Yeah. Crushed everyone. Yeah, but it's a nice. I want to segue a bit if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I get pro athletes coming in. I don't know your thoughts on this. So for a gymnast, and it occurs to me based on what you said, for them being warriors, their physique is their weapon. It's their blade.
Sure.
And so we use that physical prep, put in that final sharp edge. It's not to break down. So I'd learned this from the Russians. We do our regular conditioning the morning before the meet.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, you're exhausted. No. At this point, I'm not trying to make him stronger. I'm just keeping him sharp. Keeping him sharp. And friends who are world champion. In the U.S., we're lucky. We get a lot of Russian Olympians coming in, Chinese Olympians coming in, and they'll be the one. The Americans will look at it and go, you guys are really dumb. But the Russians and the Chinese will come and say, thank you for reminding me. I went off track and I didn't even realize it. And so, yeah, just kind of, but I get these guys and they're like, I got to get really, really strong before in preseason, and then hope, without doing any more prep, hope it lasts me through the season.
No, it never does.
Thank you.
So this episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, FieldStrong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show. For me, at least when I played, I knew I could recover from intensity. Was the volume that beat me up.
Okay.
So what I would do is I would kind of set my different kind of benchmarks. And then I would, as we got into training camp, I knew I would always have a strength peak through training camp just because, we're eating, we're sleeping, we're kind of in the fight. And I knew that my strength could peak.
Okay.
And then what I would do is I would maintain like whatever my strength kind of key numbers were, I would keep that weight and I would just reduce volume. Like it might get to the point where I'm doing, let's say on the bench, like 4 or 5 singles at like 405 in week 16, week 17, wherein early in the season, I might get that for anywhere from 6 to 8 reps.
Okay.
And so I just
same number of sets. Numbers. You're just dropping reps.
Yeah. I would just every week, depending on how I feel, like even if I was beat up. And it was just part of like the neurological,
so you
firing.
Were super ahead of far in the curve because the NHL guys and the guys we're seeing, their strength coaches are just kind of
3 sets of 10 at like a moderate weight. And I'm like, that doesn't do anything for you. It actually gives you a detraining effect.
Yeah. Since you can't train and we're traveling, this and that, well, we'll just hope for the best and pick it back up after season.
Yeah. Keeping GPP high is really important too.
Yeah.
What I realized pretty early on, we did a conditioning test at the beginning of the year with 16 110s and everybody passed. We had a bye week, maybe in about week 6 or 8. And the coaches decided to rerun the conditioning test. Okay. And like 2/3 of the team failed.
Really?
Yeah. So they were all in game shape, but they weren't in conditioning shape. And
football's such a strange sport. 10 seconds.
Yeah. Or it's even more 5 to 7, 8 seconds.
Wow.
But I ended up matching my time and they were like, man, you didn't fall off. And I'm like, yeah, but I still did all my conditioning work. I understood. And so this is something I learned after I retired. The value of that zone 2.
Isn't that normally how it goes?
True? Well, I thought that building aerobic base was just bullshit.
No.
I thought lifting heavy weights and sprinting was all I needed to do. And it wasn't until later on after the fact when I got out and we started really looking at the zone 2 and I started kind of just experimenting with it. Like, is this going to be a detraining effect? I was almost afraid that training at those lower intensities, but it goes back to what Charlie said, Charlie Francis. You're either running faster than 90% or if you're at 75%, you're doing recovery stuff.
That's a good point.
The interesting thing.
The Kenyans do that.
Well, he also talked about.
They're about 80% of their time just spent being mellow.
Yeah. And the hilarious part is he goes, where's the majority of strength built? I'm like somewhere between 75 and 90%. And he goes, exactly. What if you run in that no man's land makes you slower? You have to run faster. You got to run slow. And then he paused. He goes, what does that tell you? And I'm like, I don't know. He goes, it just goes to show you that speed isn't dictated by strength. If you got faster, you could run faster. If you got stronger, you could run faster. But there will be a point where all of a sudden strength does not help you run faster and actually becomes a negative.
Have you? Tell me what you think about this. So I've never, now this is going to be an extreme statement because there are degrees, but even after all these years, I firmly believe you're born fast or you're not. I
think you can train.
I can improve what I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's either something you have or something you don't.
Yeah, because I've got guys come in, they say, what do you think? And I think God shortchanged you and you're not going to get what you want. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I can't build what's not there.
The NFL is very similar.
Okay.
In that, obviously to play offensive line in this day and age, you got to be taller than 6'4", and you have to be able to carry close to 300 pounds. Some guys carry it better, some guys carry it worse. Okay. But your ability to be able to move fast from point A to point B and get there and be in a good position, there's just not a lot of people that are wired up for it. And it's one of those things you either can or can't do. And I remember I came in and started early, and I remember after like my second year, I wasn't a young guy anymore. And it's kind of how they break in the NFL. There's kind of like old guys and young guys, and young guys are kind of coming along. Like in my second year, I wasn't a young guy anymore.
Yeah.
And as I was in training camp, guys would come in and you could tell pretty quick after doing that job, like, oh, this guy's got a chance. He can play. This kid can't play.
Yeah, you can see it after a while.
They'd be like, what do you think? I'm like, this kid's good. I think this kid's got a future. He can do this. And it didn't matter where they came from. It didn't matter draft spot. It didn't matter anything. There were guys that were walk-on or free agents that were like, this kid can play. I mean, a couple of years ago.
You're a genetic phenom or you're not.
Yeah. I went out and worked with Dave Spitz out of Cal Strength. He had me come in and work with some of his offensive linemen getting ready for the combine. And he sat me down. He's like, do you think these guys? I'm like, there's 3 dudes here that can. And the other guys, maybe. And those 3 guys ended up still having great careers.
There you go. Yeah. Years ago, I was spending time with a guy named Rumin, Rumin, former Olympic coach for Bulgaria. Mm-hmm. He's older, really heavy accent.
Gymnastics coach?
Yeah. He had moved Bulgaria from 12th in the world to 4th. So, it's like the worst spot. You almost broke into the medals, right? Yeah. But not quite. But just crazy smart. And Rumin was the one that first, because, I'm American. Anything's possible. You just put your mind to it. And Rumin, when I was young, he's like, no, dude. No, he said, the only impact you can have on an athlete, outside of superficial is 2%. I was like, come on, seriously? He's like, 2%. So we talked, and I nagged him. We talked. He said, fine, 2.5. And, that kind of threw me when I first started working with adults, because if you're playing in the pros, you kind of get used to the level of athleticism around you. And it was that way with national team. It just kind of became my norm. And so when I first started working with adults, it was a huge transition. Because at first, I had no longer considered our national team guys as exceptional. They were the norm. So if they're the norm, then these other people, I don't know how to say it, not be rude, not the norm. But they're not the norm. And then after a while, finally the switch kind of flipped and said, well, these guys are the norm. The other guys, because if someone hasn't worked, I don't think they understand how much faster, quicker reaction-wise, the explosiveness that someone who's, top 6 in the world has. It's almost they're not even the same species. It's just shocking.
Well, also the adaptation phase and the exposure for gymnastics is so early. So when we lived in Orange County, I drove my daughters down when they were, probably from the time they were 2 to about 6, down to the Azarian.
Sure. Edward's a buddy of mine.
Yeah, so he has that big training center down there. Yeah. And I would bring my little girls down there, and we'd always get there early to watch.
His dad was a stud too.
Well,
both world champs.
Yeah. Well, this was the old man. I think he was Olympian in the 50s.
Okay.
And the Azarian.
That would have been Azarian's dad, and then Edward was the buddy of mine.
Yeah. Okay. So he was there, and I would always bring my daughters to watch the older girls.
Okay.
And that factory, they would have, there would be 50, 100 girls out there.
Sure.
Killing it for like 3 hours.
Sure.
These girls, like the conditioning with these girls, it was kind of funny. I remember in the CrossFit stuff, I'm like, dude, I don't think a CrossFitter could have made it through. And there was no adult that was going to be able to make that through. The only way these girls were making it through was the fact that they were like anywhere from like 6 to 13 years old and weighed, 85 to 100 pounds, just for the fact that the volume was so high.
We did. So I had Alan from 6 to 18, 12 years, and I added up his hours. It was like over 16,000 hours of me personally. And I'm demanding. And then, goes to university and, picks up another 8 years there before he finally retired. But Greg Glassman back in the day was always in my ear about strength endurance. And everything for us was, absolute strength. My guys were doing...
Why would strength endurance be a player in gymnastics?
It wasn't. I was going to say. It was Greg's marketing for CrossFit.
Well, if anything, gymnastics is more akin to football in the time domains.
100%.
Max effort for 3 to 5 seconds.
We were doing, my guys would do muscle ups with half body weight hanging on them, for 2-3 reps. So he's yapping, so fine. I'll kick the tires. So we set up a little thing in the middle of their workout. They did 10 bar muscle ups, no kipping muscle ups. So we do rounds of 10 of that, but I had traffic flow issue. So then they would go do 20 jump squats and they'd rotate through. So was it as AMRAP, as many
rounds as possible.
Rounds. And so we did that, and I forget, I did it for 15 minutes or whatever it was. And the guys they didn't even notice it. My lowest guy did 110 muscle ups, 130, mine was our max. Davey got bored on jump squats and started doing backflips in between. He did like 240 backflips in his squat. And I was like, so you guys are crushed now, right? He said, no, we went swing pommel horse after that. They didn't even notice. And so the conversation I tried to have with Greg is strength always comes first. Once you're strong, you can do strength endurance work. But if you're using strength endurance to get strong, you're barking up the wrong tree. You've gone the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But I mean, it didn't market well.
Well, it's because he had never strength trained.
No, he hadn't.
He once told me a story about deadlifting heavy. And as he was telling me the story, I realized, I don't know if you remember that line from the 40-Year-Old Virgin where he's like talking about like 2 bags of sand and they're like, oh, you're a virgin. I sat there and listened. I'm like, oh my God, you've never deadlifted before.
Good.
I realized as he was telling me the story, he had never pulled a bar off the ground.
Yeah. And, it was that way with his gymnastic stuff too. Yeah. So he was like, well, that's just aesthetics. And I said, like we were having an argument about they were doing the muscle ups wrong. And his comeback was, well, you just care about aesthetics. I said, Greg, I don't give a shit about the aesthetics. If you don't straighten your arms at the top and turn the rings, you're not conditioning the brachialis. That means I can't go into more advanced straight arm strength later. So I've wasted my time. And then he said, well, it's work overtime and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, but if all your work you did was low quality, who gives a damn? It didn't get you where you want. I don't care how much of it you did.
Yeah.
But you could, that's right there. I was like, him and I are never going to understand each other. He's never performed at a world-class level. I'm wasting my time.
Yeah.
But if you're not, and I get why he was successful, because if you've never been at that level, well, when you admire someone, you're going to take them at face value.
Yeah.
So a lot of people got taken.
No, it's, gymnastics is one of those things where you watch like the perfect execution. I mean, it's what's known as a closed loop sport where now I'm going to, something I've rehearsed, I'm going to go execute to the best of my ability. Like open loop sports, like let's say like football or basketball, but that closed loop where, now it's my ability to execute these movements. And I mean, even though that these are, let's say like they pre-practice the routines, the precision in which they do it, and the margin of error is so small. And like, one step this way and this way.
You want to be 70%. So if you're doing 100% of what you're capable of in a meet, no way you're successful. No way. You have to. So Alan goes to university and he's been crushing it. He's been winning. He had been winning since he was 8 years old. I think he was the youngest medalist in US gymnastics history against 13-year-olds at nationals. So he was in second place for floor. The guy who was in sixth was taller than Alan, standing on the floor, and he's in second place. Mm-hmm. But he got to university, and they thought, well, what you see is what you get. But now it's training, and he's doing all these things that they thought they had no idea. Because we start prepping. Some skills you need 3 years to develop. So he had some stuff that was partway through that window. They're like, oh, we didn't know. Now the Russians would understand, Chinese would understand, the Japanese would understand, but the American coaches, not all, but as a group, tend to rush. So I've seen Chinese Olympic girls at the Olympics draw a chalk line on the floor and do their basics. At the Olympics. You would never see an American athlete do that. Never. There's do one in the pit, you're good. Do one on your own, you're good. Let's throw it into a routine. And then they're upset. Wow, you only hit 1 out of 3. So I once, there was a guy who did first triple back on floor, Ayarov's boy, Liukin. And then his daughter, Nastya, made Olympic team and won. But I was visiting with Ayarov, his coach, and he was telling me how Liukin had done 1,000 good triple backs. He says, yeah, it takes 1,000 to be stable. And not bad repetitions, but good repetitions. We can get into the neuroplasticity and all that later. So, well, I'm going to test this. And I had an athlete early in the year, it was postseason. So I just based everything around training, testing this theory. So on pommel horse, he had a skill. He had to do Magyar. He had to do 10 good ones a day. And he had a 3-hour workout. So, if that's all we do for 3 hours trying to get that 10, that's all we'll do. If you can get it in 10 minutes, we'll move on. And sure enough, so 10 good ones a day, 5 days a week. So that's 50. 10 weeks out, we hit 500, and he can make 8 out of 10. I was like, well, that's interesting. The next 500 only took us to 9 out of 10, sometimes 10 out of 10. So just that extreme amount of repetition in order to stabilize, a world-class skill, not something easy.
What about like the mental aspect for these guys? I mean, the ability to have like the Groundhog Day of like, you're going to do this every day until you master it. And these kids are like, I'm in.
I always described it as world-class talent with a blue-collar work ethic. So most of the time, your really talented people fail. So we've had, imagine hanging on the rings and being so strong that with straight arms, you can just pull up to a support through a cross. These guys, they drop out. They drop out, or they can just do a triple back, which blows my mind. So before I got to college, one of the seniors ahead of me had been there when the Japanese guy was in, and just out of the blue, not into a pit on a regular match, does a triple back off high bar and lands and goes. He quit because he was bored. Quit because he was bored. So what we look for is, for someone who's not, God's gift, we want repetition. Repetition builds consistency. Consistency builds self-confidence. Self-confidence, then I can go in. So practice has to be harder than a meet.
Yeah.
So I would always get roomed with the Russians, right? Because I'm kind of grumpy. Well, Russians are grumpy too. So we'd be roommates, and Dmitry Belozerchev won world's first in 83 when he was 16. And so we're roommates for a couple years. He's not talking much. And then one night, we're talking training. And Russians don't like to talk training, especially way back then, right? It was early. They're still, even though they're living in the States, they're still Russian in their heart.
Yeah.
And he gives me kind of that Russian. And we're roommates. I'm like, shit. And he starts talking. It's like 8 at night. We've done our twice a day training. We've had all our coaches meetings. We've had dinner. We're sitting there. He starts talking, and it's 8 o'clock. And I finally pass out at 2 a.m. He gets going. I'm listening. I'm nodding. Finally, I pull out my laptop. I'm taking notes. It's all math. It's all math. From this age to this age, you're going to do this. You're going to do this many reps, this many repetitions. These things matter. These things don't matter. And so what people don't realize is that by the time you see someone crush it at Olympics, right, they've been tens of thousands of perfect reps for over a decade. And not just the perfect repetitions technically, but the physical structure has been modeled that allows them to execute that perfect technique. So we get, especially here in the States, we get a lot of people, well, I want to do such and such a trick. And I said, all right, well, have you done this physical preparation? Bam, 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 bam. Have you done it for 3 years? And they're like, well, I really don't have time for that. I said, well, if you want to do that, you don't have time not to, because one is going to go down 2 roads. You're either not going to be able to do it, and if you're lucky, that'll be the case, or you're going to pull it off, but it's going to be like Greg's silly kipping pullups back in the day, right, where you're going to do more than your structure can tolerate, and you're going to blow yourself up.
Yeah.
Because I was the first one pushing Greg.
I did 40 kipping pullups.
Did you blow your shoulder?
And I never did them again, for the mere fact that if I, at my size, if I can do 40, then I probably shouldn't be doing kipping pull-ups.
I like kipping pull-ups, but it's the end of the journey. It's not the beginning of the journey, because they're hitting the bottom with 2-3 times body weight. Yeah. They're going past the range of motion they have, which means they're just bouncing off the rotator cuff. Yeah. And then going up top. But Greg liked it because it was nice marketing. Yeah. You can come in. You've never been successful. I'm going to have you do this, and I'm wonderful. But I said, Greg, what happens in 2 or 3 months? You're getting slap tears. Yeah. I said, I've never seen slap tears in grown adults who are non-athletic. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, bare minimum, have them do 5. Boy, I got I was burned in effigy for that because, the people get passionate.
Yeah.
They get passionate rather than, reflective. Instead of going, hey, this guy's a national team coach, we should at least consider it.
Sure.
They're just like, no, you're an apostate.
Well, you were trying to bring a little semblance of intelligence and progression, which, there's progression in everything.
Sure. Well, should be.
I had a guy ask me, he's like, one of the questions I always get was, how did you survive those hits in the NFL? And I always go back to the Milos Bowl. I took those hits when I was 14 and everybody was the same size. And as I got bigger and stronger, the hits got bigger. And then all of a sudden you're 25, 26, and those hits are technically the same hits. They're just much more dynamic. Like I survived them when I was young, but it was like a linear progression, the Milos Bowl. As I got bigger, the bowl got bigger, the hits got the same. And so now all of a sudden you take somebody in that's never taken that hit, you throw them in, they're going to get fucking wrecked. But then you wonder, like, how can these guys take these hits day after day? And it's like, because this is what I've conditioned my body to. It's not like I just showed up here from doing nothing.
I got a question for you, John. So I had a little bit of work, not a lot, but a little bit of work with Big Paul, Triple H from wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
And he described it to me as a match. What did he say? Being in, I forget, it was 6 or 7 car wrecks every day. I was like, well, I don't even know how do you prepare for that? I mean, it's one thing for a 150-pound human being to run into another 150, but there's a lot more force when it's a 300-pound guy hitting a 300-pound guy.
Yeah.
I mean, human tissue is still kind of human tissue, isn't it?
Yeah, when I retired, my shoulder was pretty banged up, and so I went to this lady who was like a Rolfer, and she's like, "Oh, we're going to do all this myofascial release. I'll fix your shoulder." So she works. She's digging in the capsule, and they do, like with Rolfing, there's like 10 sessions, and they kind of cover the whole body. So she got to my head, and she said that the fascia in my head was so thick that she couldn't release it.
Really?
And she's like, it's almost like armor. And like within the fascia and like the skull thickness.
So physical adaptation.
Yeah, it's all like the micro stuff. So like the skulls are thicker and the fascia is really thick. And she was working on my head. She's like, I've never seen anything like it. It's almost like your head is like a shell of scar tissue. Like the fascia is just so dense. No reason. And but I think that's probably one of the reasons. There's
long-term adaptation.
Yeah, I think you adapt into it. But for me, and there are certain guys that probably maybe are genetically set up a little earlier. I adapted under barbells. It was the training and just the training heavy for a long period of time and the adaptation piece. I think that the barbells and that loading is what allowed me to do it.
I had something similar. I had, not long after college gymnastics, had appendicitis and appendectomy. Go in, nurse comes in, and she, appendectomy scar is it's tiny. I've got this scar like this big. And my surgeon, who's a smart ass, sticks his head in the door and my bandage is off and there's this huge row of staples. I was like, dude, seriously? Obviously you were at the bottom of your med school class because you know what the what.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's a funny story. And I'm sitting there all mangled. I said, okay, this should be interesting. He said, I work on MBA guys and I've never seen anything like this. He said, the way it goes is I take the scalpel, I do 2, maybe 3 cuts, I'm through the skin. 2 or 3 cuts, I'm through the muscle, and I'm looking for the appendix. And if it's not there, I can shift, find it, clip, do my thing, sew it up, gone. He said, I cut through your skin like normal. And it's important to remember, I was just medium as a gymnast. It's not like, I was Olympic caliber. So, I'm just middle of the road. He says, I get to the muscle belly, and I cut, and I cut, and I cut, and I cut. And I cut, and I cut. He says, like 7 cuts. So I've never seen anything like it. I get in there and I look for the appendix. It's not there. So I go to shift. Nothing. It is going nowhere. So, all right. And so I had to make another incision next to that. I say, all right. And how did I end with 3? And he says, well, it's funny. Your appendix is way on the other end. So I have 3 appendectomy scars. I don't have those abs anymore. But you're right, just that physical adaptation for the demands of your training.
So probably 2019, I went to get my shoulder scoped. So I flew down to see Dr. Ants, who's down in Florida. He does for Dr. Andrews' kind of regen deal. Okay. So I had met him at a event that I did for Ken Ford at the Institute of Human Machine Cognition. So I sit next to Dr. Ants, and he had done a fellowship and kind of apprenticed under Dr. Stedman, who was the guy that had done my knee surgery.
Okay.
So we kind of had like a little bit of like connection in that way. And that steady had, worked on me a few times. So I tell him, like, my shoulder's banged up. He's like, send me the x-ray. I had it on my phone. He looks at it. And he's like, I need you to come in for an appointment. So I went in, and then we scheduled the shoulder surgery. So he ends up going in and like shaving down the head right here, and kind of goes and cleans it all up. They ended up tapping my hip, taking marrow out, spinning it down, and kind of they do this stem cell kind of healing deal. So I went first, and then there was a kid who was played somewhere at Alabama that they brought in for a almost identical shoulder thing that it was like 21 that they cut right after me. So the next day I wake up in recovery, go back to the hotel, go in for rehab the next morning. And like my shoulder felt better walking into the rehab
the day after surgery.
The day after surgery than it did walking in. So as the guy starts working on it, Dr. Ants comes in to check on me, and he goes, hey, man, and there, he had like some of his surgical assistants with him, and they came in and they're like, hey, we got to talk to you about this. When we cut into your shoulder, obviously we cut through it and we're looking at everything. It's like grinding this thing down. Like we're like really working, like, these were like, big, thick parts. I mean, the insertion was here, and he kind of was taking me through everything. He goes, then we tap your hip, we pull out marrow, we spun it down, and we injected it back. And one of his surgical assistants said, after you, we brought in another college football player.
Okay.
Similar size, kid in his 20s, you're obviously in your 40s. He goes, we cut into him, and he goes, the insertions were probably 3 times as big on you as they were on him for where like the bone insertion. The muscle was probably 3 times as thick. The tendons were thicker. Your bones were so hard that it took us multiple hits to aspirate your hip to pull the marrow out. 1 hit for him. They pulled out whatever the amount of, let's say it was like 30, the amount of cc's out of your 1 hip.
Mm-hmm.
They spun it down, and the stem cell number was so far off at the chart that we were kind of, like, oh shit, this is kind of an outlier. We can't use this for our study. That kid, they took double the amount out of each hip, spun it down, and it was half as much in the stem cell count as what I had. And
what do you attribute? So you guys were doing more hits.
Well,
you're doing heavier training,
genetics. So the way that they explained it, they were like, and Dr. Ants was like 1-ton parts, half-ton parts. There's a guy that plays 10 years in the NFL and a guy who's just in college. Even though they're same size visually, he's like, you can see inside, the structure is completely different.
Okay.
Right? The insertions are bigger, the muscles are thicker, it's more dense. And this guy is half your age. And like they were just a little bit, shocked. But they were like, the stem cell count thing was wild. They were like, because usually stem cell count's related to age. And he goes, we took half as much out of you, and your count was double what his was out of the other side of it.
So not a result of adaptation to training.
I think it was adaptation to training, diet, all the other things. But there's also a genetic component. But you
started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we started training heavy when I was probably 14. So I think it's the loading. Okay. I think there's probably a diet component. There's a genetic component. The guys don't just, at least before 2009, if you played 10 years, that was a hell of a career. Kevin Turner, who, since passed away, God rest his soul, passed away of ALS. He was our fullback. Okay. He played 8-9 years. I mean, guys played 10 years. And now, after that CBA change in 2009 with all the rule changes, I remember Tony Gonzalez called me and he goes, dude, if we played in this area, he's like, everybody would have played 20 years. He's like, none of these kids would have survived the Dick Vermeil training camp. So I just think the loading, the size, the strength. I mean, what was required to be able to do your job was just.
How'd your knees? I've got a form now. He played 5 years in the league. A guy named Michael. I won't share that now. I don't have permission to share it, but he came to me for some work. He's been doing our stuff for 2 years, and he's standing there, and hips are displaced, and he's not your size. I'd put Michael at 6'3", 250. Right in there, but. He's kind of been accommodating this injured knee. Mm-hmm. And so he says, Coach, I want you to check something. So he takes his warm-up pants off, and he just got his athletic shorts. And it's the worst knee I've ever seen. It's the worst knee. I've never seen a knee that swollen. Mm. And, he's NFL tough. He's like, well, we're just going to, go. And I said, well, I know you came a long way, Michael. I said, but I need a picture of that. Mm. I need a picture. Are we because he's adapted to. He's about 50 now. He's adapted to doing things wrong for so long. Yeah. And I said, well, I don't know if I can fix what's wrong, because if your knee can't do anything, then we need to not even try.
Yeah.
So he's just now, he's got his pictures and meeting with the surgeons and that to see.
Are they going to do a knee replacement?
It's just this week, that he finally, because I had one guy named Billy. Billy's got to be mid-70s now. I got him first when he was like 60, and he was just all torn up. It was all torn up. And over the years, he's had both shoulders replaced. He's had both knees replaced, and he's just happy as can be.
I think Joe Thomas, who we had on the podcast, who played left tackle for the Cleveland. Okay. He's turned 40. He's had his hip replaced.
Okay.
And so for me, when you look at all my X-rays, like my hips are super mobile. So I've always been
strong
no hip
and
injuries.
mobile.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the one thing that got me on my knee is I tore my ACL pretty young. Okay. I was climbing down a ladder and my leg was straight and the rung broke. I drove it in.
All that weight came down.
I never noticed.
Really?
I heard it pop. My knee swelled for a few days and then it went down, and I played in college, and it wasn't until I tore some cartilage that they scoped my knee, and the guy's like, "You're missing your ACL," so they replaced my ACL.
So you're more like Franco Harris.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine trained Harris, and his ligaments are like 3 times bigger than everyone else's.
So then sometime during my 10 years, I tore my ACL again, but I never noticed. Wow. One of the issues I have, though, is the popliteus muscle in the back started kind of acting like a stabilizer. So it calcified on me. And so I have this bone spur on the back of the knee within my popliteus. So it actually locks my knee at 90 degrees. I can't get my heel to my butt anymore.
You should have gone into hockey then. All the hockey guys came in, they can't squat past 90 either.
Well, so what's funny is I was supposed to get my knee scoped a couple of years ago, and my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Sorry.
So we went through that. I know you said you went through cancer as well.
Yeah.
And so she gets that done, and then they did double mastectomy, and then they did the reconstruction. And so she went in for the reconstruction and ended up getting a staph infection. So we fought through that.
Becoming more common, staph infections.
So I kind of missed my window. And then this year they found a nodule in her lung. And so they went in and took the nodule out of her lung. So that was kind of like the end of the year. So like the last couple of years, I've kind of missed my window to get my knee scoped, because I always, sometime around Christmas is a good time.
She good now?
Yeah. Good. Yeah, she's super healthy. But it was kind of funny, like talking to the surgeon, look at this, and then all of a sudden that popped up, and I was like, Well,
don't schedule anymore. Every time you schedule it, something bad happens to your wife.
Well, but the interesting thing is, to be able to do jujitsu, there's a lot of that movement, so I just have to kind of hide my right leg a little bit. Okay. So I kind of play on my side, but I have such good hip mobility that I'm able to cheat everything.
Natural hip mobility?
Yeah. Like I was always I could always, I think it's from doing martial arts when I was little. Like when we would get into that Shotokan, like we would have to sit on our knees, and then we would constantly be working on the splits.
The old school Japanese instruction.
On the wood. And then we had to work on the splits all the time. They had this machine that would try to the stretching thing.
The rack.
Yeah. And so I was able to, I can't do it straight, but if I turn, I can still get into a splits.
Nice, dude.
Yeah. So I always...
The old Russian gymnasts are that way too. They still have perfect mobility.
Yeah, if
they'll die from alcohol poisoning
and cigarettes,
but they die really with good mobility.
If I could snap my finger and just magically fix this knee, I don't think I'd have anything to complain about.
Okay, well, with such a long career, nice. Thank God for gifts, huh?
Yeah, I just think that certain people, and I met certain guys that didn't make it out of college that have, joint replacements and this and all these problems. Then you meet other guys that played, 10, 15 years and have nothing.
We'd see some guys, some tumblers take a short landing and you just kind of go, oh, he just broke his leg. He broke his leg. Get up, nothing, walk. I said, wow, not a prayer in the world I would have survived that.
So this is something that's always fascinated me. Why is it? And I went back and read all the Russian training manuals, and they talked about exposure and adaptation, and that there's times for athletic performance. And the one that was always fascinating to me was that the peak performance years for the girls was 14 to 16, and the boys I think was 16 to 18.
Even up to 22.
Up to 22 because it takes,
puberty for the girls.
Yeah.
The hips widen. Remember, was it the valgus? So, the girls are away because of their hips spread as they get older. They've got that more extreme angle now from the hip coming into the knee. So, they're already predisposed to ACL injury. They haven't even done anything.
But I mean, you look at the Nadia Comaneci.
Sure.
She's like 13, like this, or 12, years
old.
Baby
girls. Yeah.
She's like this little waif. But then I'm watching the Olympics this year.
So it's a different world now.
And all these girls are in their 20s. And I think Simone Biles is almost 30?
Yeah, but look at Simone's hips.
She's like...
She's got sprinter hips. She's got narrow hips. Look at...
wide shoulders.
She's got wide shoulders. It was... I don't even remember. Helen's a few years older than her. So we're at Summer Nationals one year, Visa Championships, and you've got your training gym in the back. So guys and girls are set up, and Simone hasn't hit the big time yet. And she comes walking through, and she's just, how old is she? She's got to be 13, 14. She's little bitty, and she's got shoulders like this. She's got like 3 6-packs. Comes by, and I told Alan, I said, if you marry her and you have kids, I will come out of retirement to train your children. And no one knew, what she was going to do later. But the women are just so much more athletic now. Whereas back in the day, it was much more, it was like ballerinas who tumble. And now they're power athletes now. Yeah. It's a different world.
Well, so I went to Berkeley.
Okay.
And
I want to talk about the rhetoric major sometime.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. So what was interesting is we used to go hang out with a bunch of gymnastics guys and a bunch of the gymnastics girls.
Cal used to have a really good program.
And we'd see them in the weight room all the time. And what was interesting is those girls were always had a weird chip on their shoulder. And even we kind of talked to them a little bit. And they were like, it's weird to be here in college, doing gymnastics, for a scholarship when we missed our window to truly be great at this. And so there was like it was fascinating to me. They're like,
this is your consolation prize.
Yeah. You're playing football with the hope to go play in the NFL and reach this pinnacle.
They're opposite.
Yeah. The window already passed me. I'm here as a has-been doing gymnastics for a scholarship and executing in something that I wasn't, or I'm worse today than I was 5 years ago when I was a kid training. And there was like a weird kind of chip, almost like a little bit of bitterness, and like all those 100%. Girls were.
We used to call it the dark side.
Yeah, like every one of them. Yeah. Like they were.
Part of it is because they got sold a bill of goods, right? If you're not dominating as a junior. I'll back up a bit. So you'll get kids who are really, really young, who are studs, and then nothing ever happens, right? And then you get the late bloomers, right, who weren't anything, and they do well. And then you get a few who are just steady all the way through. Alan was steady. But, kind of if you weren't a stud when you were young, the odds are you're not going to make the Olympic team. I'm sorry, and I know you love it. And so we'll go back to 2004. I'm running my elite guys, and I'm assisting. The gym owner asked if I'll assist with his elite girls. And I think Carly ends up 9th. They take 6. So she's one of the alternates. The emotional strain on women who train is astronomically higher than for guys who train. It's just so as guys, especially when we're young, we just care about going out and doing a good job. Yeah. To be crass about it, we're going to kick ass and we just don't care.
I have daughters and I grew up with all brothers, and you can go and randomly pick up like 10 boys. Like if you were somewhere and there were just like 10 families showed up and there was 10 boys about the ages of like 6 to 10 years old, you could go wrangle those little boys up and you could put together a game that would be pretty competitive, and they would all play on the team very well. Sure. They would understand. Like I watch my son's baseball, all these kids show up like first day and they're like a team, and they kind of figure out the hierarchy. I can pitch, I can do this. And they all kind of like figure this thing out, and they can all go out and have fun. That does not exist for girls.
Does not.
Like if you were to go pick like 10 girls between 6 and 10 and be like, hey, I need you to come up with a game and play this. Not in a million years.
It will be really different. It will be really different because the girls are much more hyper-aware socially than guys are.
Yeah. And
so when a girl goes out to compete, so I've seen Caitlin, for example, on beam at championships and training. It was like she was tumbling on a sidewalk. Not a twitch, not a wiggle. Alan and I were just like, whoa.
Oh, is that girl from UCLA?
Yeah. Yeah.
What, she's like a Japanese name?
Ohashi.
Man, that girl, I was in prepping for this, I was watching gymnastics and kind of going through, and I actually saw one of her videos, and like she got so much height.
Yeah.
Like there was something and she landed on a pad, I remember, and they this was like an incredible tumbling routine. But like the joy that she had in her face to be able to do it, like you can't hide that. And then you were watching some of the other gymnasts and you could almost see them begrudgingly do it. Sure.
It's the girls are worried about doing well, but that's like far down the list. They're worried about, when she got to the meet, she was everywhere. And we're like, what happened? And finally we figured out after years, the girls doing well is not first on their mind. Is, does everyone like me? Mm-hmm. Am I going to disappoint my coach? Am I going to disappoint my family? Are my friends supporting me? They have all this extra pressure that guys don't have.
Yeah. Don't give a shit.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. Guys like, whatever, they're going to be sad.
I remember, like my wife, we go to all of our kids' sports, and I think my wife asked me, I'm like, I don't even remember. I don't even think my parents even came to our practices.
Yeah, I had one.
Like they dropped us off, and my wife's like, no, we got to be there, and it's like a big deal. It's a big deal. And I was like, for the girls, I was like, do the boy, like I there were games I was at, like my parents were never at, like I wasn't necessarily like needing them, where she's like, and my wife played soccer at a high level, and she's like, knowing my parents were there and my dad was the most important thing.
100%.
Like I wanted to perform because they were there. Like you have to be there. And I was like, she's like, boys are so different. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like as long as I get a ride home, I'm fine.
That's why those of us who are hyper competitive end up with daughters. It's like God said, we're going to slow your roll here a little bit.
But I made that observation the other day to my wife. I'm like, I could go just randomly find 10 boys at like the, Route 12, and I could come up with a game. And they do all the time. Like these boys show up and they're like, we're about the same age. Let's play. Yeah. Girls, no way.
No way.
It's just a completely different set.
It's different. Yeah. They have a lot more emotional burdens than we do. It's much more involved. You'll see if a group of girls get together, they're not going to go out. Guys will go out and compete, do their thing. They'll wrestle, they'll eat, they'll done. But the girls are going to create these social circles and interact, and just at a level that, guys, one would fall asleep. But, for the women, it's just essential. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times in their training, it gets over. So I'm doing elite girls that summer, and I'm doing their prep in a morning workout, and a girl named Christy just out of the blue starts crying. Now, if a guy's crying, he's got a broken leg. There's a bone sticking out somewhere. Yeah. And the girls, I was like, well, Christy and the girls, it was the other girls who told me, just ignore it. She's fine. Well, why is she crying? It's just a thing. Just let it go.
Girls cry.
Just ignore it. Okay. Huge. It took me so long to get used to that. So is it crying because it's an issue, or are they crying just because they're venting? Yeah. And you kind of got to learn which one is it? And you can't tell them not to cry because they need to cry. Yeah. So now you get weird stuff like they're crying while they're chalking. And it's got to look insane from someone who's out in the seating area going, wow, he is just a cast iron SOB. Look at that. It's like, no, I swear, she just needed to cry. It wasn't me.
Or maybe it's a stress relief.
It's just different. So for the girls, what we get is we get guys who are tough, who are training girls like they're guys. Yeah. And that's a bad thing. That one's not going to work. And the girls hate training. The coach hates training them, but they think we'll go through all this and we'll make Olympic team and it'll all be okay. Yeah. I get that it looks that way from the outside, but at the end, it's no different than a Super Bowl or an NFC championship. At the end of the day, it's cool in the moment and it matters. but it's just another athletic competition.
Yeah.
And it's, if you didn't bring something really awesome with you to the table, then you're not going to have something really awesome after the event. You're still who you were.
Well, I always feel different than women. Men will succeed in spite of.
Yes.
So I had coaches that would be like, "You're never going to amount to anything," and I was
story of my life. Sure.
Yeah, I probably told it on this podcast, but I had a basketball coach who was kind of a drunk, and he would show up hammered and just berate us. Mm-hmm. And then, and like we were, he like the fact that like you could go coach kids basketball at 10 and be a drunk and then just verbally berate kids and people didn't throw the dude out. Like, it just blew my mind. But like, he was like super abusive and told us that, you suck at this. And we went out and played hard. Not because he was, for whatever reason, other than that we were let's go prove this fucking drunk wrong. Yeah. And, other coaches, I've always said, man, all I need is somebody to not believe in me or tell me 100%. I can't do it. Whereas women are much different.
You can't. No. And I think for the guys, it's necessary.
Yeah.
Because you notice if a woman's upset, she gets supported. If a guy's upset, you know what? Deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the world treats them. So I think they do us a favor. Well, you'll either rise to what I've noticed. You'll either rise to the challenge or you'll fold.
Yeah.
You'll focus or you'll fold. And I'm okay either way, because it's the only way for the cream to rise. Because everyone says they're a stud. All right.
Everybody says they want to be great.
Yeah, everyone says it, but who actually did it? Not, well, I'm on my way. Okay, well, maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't. So guys, they have to go prove themselves. And so the ones who aren't wired, when they hear that you're never going to do it and it doesn't get their dander up, doesn't light that fire, I don't think they're ever going to be the best at whatever their chosen endeavor is. You got to have that grit where really. And I don't see a lot of grit. I think it's more rare than we think it is. I think it's more rare. I was unusual. I'd always get berated. Berated's too strong. I'd get teased by the Russian and Chinese coaches because I like athletes with grit more than if they have talent, right? And so I'll just pour. I had kids for a decade that when I first got them, it took me 3 years to teach them a cartwheel. And the one I'm thinking of, Ian, right now, he's a major in the Air Force. He's a pilot, not a gifted student, not a gifted athlete, but he just had grit. He just never backed off. And, Alan did all his things, but he should have done all those things. He had that level of talent. Mm-hmm. The kids I'm most proud of over my career are those ones who started with a weak hand and maxed it.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I look back on and I go, I'm proud of myself for that.
We had Angela Duckworth on the podcast who wrote the book Grit. And
really?
One of the, I think growing up for me, I was the youngest of three boys. And, my brothers and I's favorite game was just basically like to punch each other in the face.
100%.
And we competed in everything. Like there was never a moment my parents had a place in Mammoth and we'd go skiing. And and even like at ages younger than what my kids are, my parents would just drop us off and we'd go to the top of the mountain and fucking try to kill ourselves.
Nice.
Like the amount of like situations where my brother to this day will laugh and be like, dude, like the fact, I don't know how we survived, and two,
I know, right?
If our kids told us that they were doing this, like my heart would stop.
100%.
And but Angela Duckworth had an interesting thing that kids that go through hardship early in life develop an internal fortitude, and
the ones who survive it,
and they survive it. But she said what I'm so fearful of is with helicopter parents and the society we live in. Kids might never experience failure until they're in their 20s or 30s. We had an intern, great kid, came in and, we were hard on him and, expected a lot in this. And he was pretty upset. And I was like, what are you upset about? He's like, I feel like this is the first thing I haven't been good at in my life. I'm like, how old are you? He's like 23. I'm like, so wait a minute. At 23 years old, your first internship after college is the first thing that you feel like you're failing and haven't been good at? He's like, yeah. I was like, shit, I got fucking called a dumbass every single day. And like, I was like, I had football coaches and I mean, just the verbal abuse that we took from our, as a, young athlete, whether it be, on the soccer field or this, I mean, that was just kind of indicative of the time. Whereas now,
how do you replicate that grit without the abuse? That I was worried.
I don't know.
So, I'll tell you how we did. So I had a really abusive childhood. The big thing in our house was line everyone up, pull out the belt, start beating everyone until someone admitted doing whatever the stupid shit was. Right? And I always had one brother who would always cave. Even if he didn't, he'd cave every time. And then he'd get beat more. Yeah. And the rest of us just go, that's really stupid, but he could never figure that out. So, I had just this normal stupid stuff that guys do. I spent a winter in Utah with no heat. My own fault. Yeah. Under an electric blanket because I couldn't afford a gas deposit. But now we start doing better and we've got a good life. My daughters grow up very comfortable and I'm worried. How do you develop strength of character without that suffering? And so I reached out to one of my mentors way back when. He was like, always have them see you working.
Yeah.
Always have them see you working. So if you're at home, you're in your office, the door is open. So maybe they come in, they talk, maybe they don't, but even as they walk by, they see. They're learning from your example.
Yeah.
And he said, then, accountability. Accountability, set your standards, whatever they're going to be, and make them. So now my oldest daughter is just getting ready to be 24, and she's surrounded by the product of all those helicopter parents. And, we've had a lot of talks where obviously she's performing, at the top of her field. But even people who are 20 years older than her, they're intimidated, even though she's sweet and polite and nice, but she has this drive that they don't have, and the drive freaks them out, and that attention to detail. And it's these guys will do good enough is good enough, and she's like, well, we can do better. And so she's always pushing for better. And they just can't handle it. And so luckily she has me to kind of explain, here's the psychology behind it, sweetie. It's not you. So until, if you're a hard charger, you have a lot of grit, you have a lot of character. It's not till I got to really high world-class levels of performance and surrounded by other world-class performers, I was like, oh, I'm not weird. I'm not wrong. I was with the wrong people. I was playing in the wrong sandbox. And then you get up to that level where everyone thinks like you. Everyone solves problems like you. And then we start doing podcasts. Now it's billionaires think like I think. New York Times authors think like I think. Spec ops think like I think. Other pro athletes think like I think. Oh. So now it's kind of imagine the isolation back in the day before that, where you're a hard charger, you want the best, you're not going to settle, and you're surrounded by mediocrity. And they're all trying to pull you down.
Yeah.
They're like the nail, got to hammer that nail down. So, today at least they know it's not them. And it's not a get out of jail free card. Hey, do whatever you want. It's still that responsibility, but be aware of, the way I try to explain it to her is, it's unreasonable to expect extraordinary effort from ordinary people.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not blowing smoke at you. I'm not trying to tell you you're God's gift, but it's a little bit like they're colorblind and you're not. You can always see something to improve, and you're going to tell them if it's not better. But for them, it's okay. We can work around it. It's good enough. I don't have to. I said, sweetie, and that's okay. You got to understand there's more of them than us. Yeah. But you just have to keep looking. Well, it's no different than the military, right? Yeah. There's the big army, which I wasn't a part of. Where
I worked with Big Army.
There you go. You understand where I'm going.
It's awful.
Yeah. Individual excellence is penalized.
Well, that's why I like working on the other side of the house.
100%.
And we work with the guys at Dev Group because results in excellence, whereas we worked with the big army, and I felt that we used to call it Captain Mediocrity.
Yes, 100%.
It's almost, if you're a high performer, they push you out.
Yep.
And they're like, you have to go to Special Operations Command.
They should push you out. They should push you out, which I didn't understand back in the day. So military intelligence is on that side of the fence.
I did hear a rumor that you were military intelligence, and I also heard that you were a code breaker and speak Chinese fluently.
Well, I spoke Chinese media with mediocrity. So I was a Mandarin linguist and then a signals intelligence analyst for the military and at NSA. 40, I won't admit, well, it hurts to admit that it's over 40 years ago now. That's a long time. But, on that side of the fence, excellence was embraced. It was rewarded. They looked for it. And so, but I didn't know otherwise, right? I was young. I went into that space. The better you do, the more you're recognized, more opportunities. Life is great. But then you hit the real world where mediocrity is celebrated. Boy, I had a hard time with that. That took me forever to wrap my head around that.
How did you transition into coaching? I mean, obviously you had this life. I mean, you had done gymnastics.
I'd done gymnastics.
But how did you kind of get into the GymnasticBodies and the coaching and kind of like
just luck?
Luck,
yeah. It was. I was finishing up my tour at NSA, National Security Agency, and I'd been training in the evenings. I've been going to gymnastic gym and training. And bless his heart, Rich Martin had, he's older, I'm young, I'm early 20s, and he knew me better than I knew myself. And so I thought I fit in well with their program, right? But he was like, Chris, his excuse was, it's closer to your home if you go train with. So this was Rich, and the other guy's name is Rick Tucker. Rick's a national team coach. It's closer to your house, So he said, closer is better. What he really wanted is you approach things so driven that you're going to fit in over here better, which 100% true. And then I'm getting ready to transition. Am I going to re-up? Am I going into college? And then they said, hey, we'll pay you to coach. And I'm working for a national team coach. I'm like, seriously? You'll pay me to do what I would have done for free? Well, that's mind-blowing, yes. And too young. So part of what you'll pass on to your kids and I pass on to mine is that there are certain lessons you only learn after you've been successful. Right? There's a certain way you manage your money. There's a certain way you build your money. There's a certain way you prepare to do so. And these things that are needed are non-negotiable. Right? But I come from a poor family and a poor background. So for me, it was all the tests showed you're really bright, you're really talented, go do whatever you want. Well, that's a really bad thing to tell someone with my nature, because what that means is I can go do anything I want. And if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. And there's no one there to say, yeah, but you have to do this. You don't have a choice. And so if I had to do it over again, I would have I'd have probably gone into emergency medicine and coached on the side. Because as an Olympic level coach, you have a lot of glory, but we're not getting NFL contract money.
Yeah.
We're not. And so GB was an accident. So I'd run into Pavel Satsulin, who, funny enough, has a house now after all these years, a few miles down the road from me in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, funny. Small world.
I always laugh at Pavel in that I felt like his Russian accent got thicker the longer he went. I remember hearing some interviews in the early days of the Dragon Door deal.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, and then all of a sudden I think I heard him on a podcast and he's got this thick Russian accent. Yeah. And I'm like, it's almost as if the accent's gotten more defined over the years.
It's kind of Pavel's awesome, but it's marketing.
Yeah.
People want to hear it, and it's part of the brand. And it's kind of like, if that gets there, and I like Pavel's work. And so I had gone and met Pavel, and Pavel asked me to write a chapter for a book. And this is kind of the same time that Glassman is romancing me to join CrossFit, early 2000s. And I've told both of them, no, I'm busy. I've got nationals to prep for. And they're both, please. Fine.
What was your training facility? Was that in Arizona?
Yeah, it was at the time was Desert Devil. So about, I can't remember, it was 30 or 33,000 square feet. Oh. Nice facility. Had a reputation of excellence, mostly from the father who had passed, Stormy. Had been really, really good back in the day. He had passed, and then his son Jeff took over, and then the mom and that. And it was so someone who's destined to kind of be at the top of their game is always going to be perceived as a troublemaker. Not because they're trying to cause trouble, but because they're always looking for optimum solutions, right? It's going to be, well, we could do this better, right? We could do that better. We could adjust this schedule, do this conditioning. And for someone who is good but not trying to be excellent, those are just constant irritants. It's just constant irritants, right? So in a perfect world, you're working for someone who is built the same way you are to pursue excellence. But the odds are no, that is not going to be the case. So my mentor got lucky in that Rob, as he was doing his government work, had someone who kind of shielded him from all the politics. You know, I didn't have that. My daughter certainly doesn't have that right now, right? So it's kind of funny because they'll make excuses like crazy. They'll like the excellence you bring to your business or the endeavor, but they'll also hate the constant irritation of you pushing for refinement to improve. We can do more. We can do better. We need this and this. It's good enough. Good God, can you just chill out? But we can't chill out. So I had someone come up and they sat down by me one day. I'm training. We're on parallel bars. And he meant it as an insult. I understand that now. I was young then. He said, "You're like one of those damn Chinese coaches." So, yeah, what's that? He says, "You will sit here for hours working with this athlete till it's right. You're not going to get upset. You're not going to be impatient. You're just going to sit here for hours." And we're just turn after turn. I said, "Well, yeah." I remember being surprised. Well, of course. Doesn't everybody? How could you expect to do excellence if you haven't earned it? So I'm kind of in that. Pavel asked me to write a chapter for a book. No. Keeps asking. I said, fine. I write out a chapter on just basic little stuff, some front levers, some flange stuff. I walk out with this tiny little 3x2 camera, take some pictures, shoot it off to Pavel. And I forget about it. And Pavel sends me a note back and he says, I like this, but I'm not going to put it in the book. It's too good. I'm going to publish it separately. I said, okay. You know, doesn't mean anything to me. It's early 2000s. Internet's not really anything yet. Yeah. And he says, I need a photo of you. So I'm going to need a little bio. I need a photo of you and then a little bio and give them an email. It's fine. So I open up my email one day and I've got 300 emails. All ask me about this stupid article. And we're all freaking out because prior to this, Bodyweight was just push-ups and pull-ups. And back in the day, they would never have access to someone like me unless they were a national team athlete. They'd never have access to you unless they were a pro athlete. It's not that we're snooty. It's just, that's the demands of the job.
Well, there's ivory towers.
Yeah.
And like for, in the NFL, there's different training facilities. Okay. So we go to Athletes Performance and this, and there are 4 professional athletes and you train with other pro athletes. Mm-hmm. So the fact that now people have a snapshot inside or can go to these places and have access, for a lot of times, was just behind closed doors.
Never see it. So that kind of happened with that. And I'm writing, I'm probably, there are other coaches in the world that are as good as I am. There are other coaches in the world that are better than I am, but there's not many. There's not many, but there are, and a lot better than me. I don't want to over exaggerate, but there's a handful. But I'm probably the only one at my level that also is a good writer. I can communicate. I'm good. Same thing I did at NSA. I'm good at pattern recognition. I'm good at progressions and kind of integrating all these strange nuggets of information, right? Synergy. And it just happened to be the right place at the right time. I got good advice from Pavel. I got really bad advice from Glassman.
The hilarious thing is I got hurt in my 10th year. I came home, had a knee surgery, and I was, had graduated with the rhetoric degree, and the goal was to go to law school. So when I got drafted,
I was curious. I was on the way towards law school too.
Yeah. So I didn't know how long I would play. Okay. And so I figured I'd go to the NFL, how long do white dudes play? I mean, I had 3 years, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just didn't know. And I didn't really know anybody that played in the NFL. And all the guys that I had played with that were there were like, a bunch of big black dudes. And I was like, I'm like a white dude. I don't know how long I'm going to play. So I figured make a little bit of money. And there was a law school. There was a scholarship for a 4-year letterman at Cal to go to Berkeley Law School.
Really? Good
called
for
the
you.
Adrian Cragen Scholarship.
Smart thinking.
So I had known him, and I'd kind of like been kind of sniffing around that this is what I'm going to do. So I get drafted, and I come in and I start as a rookie.
Where were you drafted at?
I was the second pick in the 4th round.
Nice. Come.
So I come in, I start as a rookie. I get hurt. I told you about the patellar tendon. So like my first,
not the auspicious start you were hoping for.
First NFL start, end of like right before the half, I step on a seam.
God, can you imagine how you were being trashed at coaches' meetings? Your first start, and you go down, and they were just talking shit like you've never heard.
And I step on a seam. This was Old Veteran Stadium. The turf was shitty, and my foot got kind of caught in a seam. Okay. And I got hit and loaded and ruptured my patellar tendon. Okay. And so then they stitched me out, and and at that point, like I was the starting right tackle. And
would have been nice to place a bet for yourself that I'm going to come back from this and have a 10-year career.
Well, they also told me when the doctor came in that they'd never had anybody come back from this injury before my career was finished. And so as I'm laying there on the table, I look and I like see my mom and dad who had come down, and like a tear streamed down my dad's face, and I never saw my dad cry before. Okay. Here's the situation. And I remember thinking like, I got a game plan. I'm going to get my knee right. I'm going to figure this thing out, and I'm going to be done. I'm going to go to law school and out of this thing. So part of my rehab was about me coming back and trying to be just normal and healthy. Okay. And I end up, hitting it, and
who would have ever seen that coming?
Yeah. And then I come back and the hilarious part is I go to training camp in that second year, and I was like the 3rd string left tackle. Okay. I'd started at right tackle in the offseason. They signed a guy, John Runyon, for like $40 million. Big high price free agent at right tackle. And so I'm the 3rd string left tackle. I'm
filling you into a crack.
I'm so far down on the depth chart, I'm on the 2nd page. And all of a sudden, Runyon goes down with an injury.
What was his injury? Do you remember?
He tore a rib muscle.
Really?
Yeah, he tore an intercostal, like into his ribs.
Which is painful.
Which is a real painful injury. He was out. Yeah. So they put in his backup, and he was getting killed in training camp. And I just so happened to be standing there, and Andy Reid looks over and he goes, "Didn't you used to play right tackle for us?"
Andy Reid?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I was drafted the first year in the NFL, or first year's head coach. Andy looks at me and goes, "Didn't you used to play right tackle for us?" And I was like, "Yeah." Started until I got hurt. And he's like, "I need you to go play right tackle." So I go over and I'm playing, and that guy was getting killed. I go and I start playing right tackle, and I'm playing pretty well. We go into the first preseason game, and I'm starting at right tackle. And the number 1 pick in the NFL draft that year was a defensive end who went to Cleveland, who we were playing in the preseason. And so all cameras are on this dude.
And you were up against him?
And I'm lined up against him. And he's a rookie, but I'm in my 2nd year, and I'm effectively a rookie because I got hurt.
You had how deep in the game were you before you went down?
I was end of the first half.
Okay.
So like
3 series. You had some
experience. Okay. So I go out there and just, for about 3 series, end up handling this kid pretty well. So I come off the field, and there's all this media in my locker, and they're like,
because you handled the number 1 pick.
Yeah. And they put the microphone, you were more than able to do this. Can you believe that they paid Runyon all this money? And I just was like, man, have you seen John Runyon? He's like 6'8". I'd pay that guy $40 million.
Nice, good answer.
And so they diffuse, walk away, and the GM walks over to me. This guy named Tom Modrak, and he's like, "Man, you handled that really well. Thank you." And I was like, yeah, no problem. And so then we go back to training camp, and we're out there, and the guy that was playing left guard, who had got drafted the round ahead of me the same year, a guy named Doug Brzezinski. Doug was struggling. He was kind of going through that second-year slump, and I think he was...
Why is there a second-year slump?
He came in and started 16 games as a rookie, and he was on the all-rookie team, and I think he lacked some confidence. The coaches were trying to overcoach him a little bit.
Okay.
And I think I think he was having some confidence issues, and we went to a inside run drill, like 9-on-7, like inside run 9-on-7, and a guy just grenaded the A gap and blew him up, and they're big tackle for loss, and like dudes are like dancing and going crazy like in the middle of training camp, and so they call the play, same play on 2, same exact thing happens, and Andy starts yelling and screaming, and he starts looking around, and I just so happen to be standing there, and he's like, John, go play left guard. So pulled Doug out, and they were like, same play on 2. And I knew
so
that
they
dude
knew
was
3 times.
I knew exactly what was going to come. So I got off the ball early, got really low, lifted the dude, drove him, and then the running back ran behind me for free. And then the buzzer rang, the beep, and we went to the next drill. And I just was standing there. We go to a 1-on-1 or a 11-on-11 pass.
Okay.
And I was a tackle and was a pretty good pass pro guy. So all of a sudden, first play, Doug gets kind of shook, gives up a sack that, the defensive runs by with his finger in the air screaming as the quarterback throws the ball. And he gets pissed, pulls him out, puts me in. And like playing guard in the NFL after you've played tackle is very simple, right? You got a 3 technique. You're just going to one-on-one this dude. It's simple. When you go play tackle, these guys are, much faster.
You got to be much more mobile, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just set him like a tackle, ended up shutting the guy down. And then at the end, he's like, this move is permanent. And I was the starter. And then I started for the rest of my NFL career.
That's awesome.
So I
got a question.
Oh, yeah.
How much, so like embarrassingly, I live in Arizona where the Cardinals are our team. And I have great shame because of this. And we passed on Mahomes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But we took Josh, whatever his name was. And then how much of Mahomes' success is Andy?
He plays in a system that benefits him, but I think that guy is
just a freak.
He's got a lot of intangibles.
Okay. I've always been curious.
I don't think that he would have had the same career pre-2009. So
I always forget about that because from the outside, it's not as crystal clear as for you guys.
We went to a game this year, and I watched things that he was doing that would have absolutely got him killed in a different generation.
Okay,
he would not have been able to play the game that he does.
You couldn't have survived as the mobile quarterback today.
Travis Kelce would have never been able to survive. I mean, I'm watching him go across the middle, squat, and they're throwing him a pass, and guys are tackling him around. I mean, the safeties would have taken his head off.
Isn't Travis the one dating Taylor Swift or something? Yeah. So his judgment's questionable anyway. So.
Well, I mean, dude, he found himself a billionaire. He's obviously, playing the long game. But, oh, God, so one of my favorite jokes is, and we have a Discord with our coaches, and we were making jokes about somebody was like, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. And one of my favorites is like, the poet of a generation said people throw rocks at shiny things, which is one of Taylor Swift's deals. So I always make a joke that she's the voice of a generation.
Okay. All right.
But watching that game, I'd seen Willie Rofe at the game, who was our left tackle. He's on the all-decade, one of the best to ever do it at left tackle. And he's like, dude, like this game would not have existed in our time. Like the things that Mahomes doing, he would have gotten absolutely murdered. I mean, they can't touch these guys. The tight ends go across the middle, can sit down without any fear of the safety coming and taking their head off. Like it's just
what has it done to football as a business?
Well, it's exploded.
Has it improved it?
They've added a ton of money. But I think the problem was, you have these high-priced guys. I mean, they're not going to pay a dude $500 million and let him get his head fucking cleaned off.
Okay.
Like just go back and you can do a YouTube search. I mean, look at like the hits that Tom Brady took in that first 8 or 9 years. I mean, got absolutely murdered. And then that CBA comes and then all of a sudden he even said it like, I could have never have played another 10 years in the time in which we played. It was just a different game. Like I said, the training camp was more physical. The level of intensity in the games and the violence, I played right at the end of that era. And, 10 years, I mean, a dude was 10 years, he might as well have been 400 years old. Over the age of 30, you were your expiration. Now, all of a sudden, you have these guys playing into their mid-30s. I mean, it just didn't exist.
So So I've met Fitzgerald, but just at a charity thing.
Larry Fitzgerald? He's a good player.
Well, we were there, we're at dinner, 6'3", 218.
Yeah.
I did not believe he was 218. He looked like a solid 230, 240 to me. And I mean, I was just like, there's no way you're 218, dude. There's just no way on this planet.
Well, he could be lying about it.
Or lean as hell.
Yeah.
I mean, just carved out of stone.
Yeah. I mean, this is what's pretty, I've been very, I'm a big proponent of diet. Okay. I think that there's a way that people should eat, and I think there's a way that people shouldn't eat.
What do you like? Give me some.
I'm always been a proponent of a high protein diet. I've been eating a high protein diet for as long as I've been eating. I still go back to some of the original Rob Wolf.
Rob's a good guy. Rob kept me alive during cancer.
Like that paleo diet and that, Art Devaney, that evolutionary fitness.
I forgot about Art.
Yeah. Like that stuff was impactful. I mean, that was Mauro de Pasquale's diet. Okay. So Mauro had was based off of the Stone Age diet or the caveman diet, which was Vince Gironda.
Forgot about Vince.
Yeah.
But they were keeping out. What about fat?
So
like they put me on high fat to keep me alive during cancer.
Yeah.
My body did not. Well, my digestion didn't like it. Yeah. Obviously, my body stayed alive during it. But I was just going, I cannot wait to get off this high fat stuff.
But I've never eaten a high fat keto
So you're
diet.
Always doing
high protein,
moderate fat,
low carb.
Carb based moderate upon, carb.
Yeah,
whatever your calories are left.
Yeah,
carb.
And but I always go back. I mean, I've always gravitated towards. I remember when Rob and I were talking about the paleo diet, and I'm like, yeah, that was Mauro's diet. That's what I ate through my whole NFL career.
Okay.
And when Rob was like, oh shit, and so I still eat 90% of that original paleo diet.
What would be a meal? Give me an example of a meal.
Today I had 2 massive chicken breasts. I had an orange. I had a piece of hard cheese, and I think I drank like 3 coffees.
How big was the cheese, ounce-wise, you think?
Probably about 1.5 ounces, 2 ounces.
So for a guy your size, that's just
small.
Tiny. Okay.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I like, I kind of alternate between on training days.
No veggies in there? Well, you're counting the fruit as the veg?
Yeah. This is kind of wild. We had just episode 803, we had Sabine Hazen on the podcast. Okay. And Dr. Hazen is, she's mapped the human microbiome. I mean, her research is like light years ahead of where anybody else is. Awesome. I mean, she was on the podcast talking about curing Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia. She's taken kids who were nonverbal, autistic, and now all of a sudden they're verbal. I mean, she's
by using this diet.
Well, no, I mean her stuff is basically she analyzes stool samples and maps the microbiome.
I think I saw a clip. Gotcha.
And then based upon that, so when we were going through my stuff,
supplemented with the probiotic then to grow the biome.
She uses probiotics.
Specific.
And she has a bunch of different supplements, and then it's diet. And there's a lot of levers she pulls. But I remember as we were going through mine, my diversity was through the roof. So I was like an 8, which is pretty high. Like I think my daughter was like an 8.2. Most people in America are in the 4s. Bifidobacteria was high. I mean, like a lot of good things going on.
Did she confirm? I've heard rumors that people who had got vaxxed, the bifido was gone.
Yes.
She confirmed that?
Yeah, that was her research.
That was hers?
Yeah.
Okay.
So she showed how the vaccine destroyed bifidobacteria. She also did the genetic sequencing of COVID in the stool.
Really?
That was her research. So, I mean, it was her research that the Doctors Beyond Borders used to treat people around the world with ivermectin and zinc and D and vitamin C and all this. So, I mean,
I remember back at analysts at NSA, this whole thing starts. Fauci back in the day says, this is the infection rate. So I was like, seriously? So, I ran the numbers. This is our population. This is the exponent. This is the rate of infection. 30 days, we should have 4 million dead. These are the numbers. 30 days came and went, and I was like, all right, someone's full of shit.
Yeah.
And that was, I remember my family, I told them, I said, guys, something's not right here.
Yeah.
Because they're claiming this, but if that's the case, we should have 4 million bodies. Yeah. And then, of course, they shift numbers, and I'm a numbers guy. So the first thing I do is they're claiming, oh, we have this many, but I went and compared annual deaths year over year. They didn't increase. There was no statistical. No, it was the same.
It was the same as
they just
the
moved.
flu?
Yeah, they just flu disappeared. Everything. They just adjust. Because I learned that at NSA. They'll say, "Oh, numbers never lie." Bullshit. It's all in where you place them.
Yeah.
You can make it say whatever you want. So I ran those numbers like, and then I was cancer. So my particular cancer drug was 12 years in development.
What was your cancer?
I had throat cancer. So So I went in for tonsillitis. Well, I thought tonsillitis. And my primary care doc says, I don't know what this is. I get a referral to an ear, nose, and throat guy who's a major ass. And if I could remember his name, I would crucify him publicly, but I can't. He was a total ass. Everyone will understand why in a minute. But we go and we do the biopsy. And then this particular type of throat cancer, there's like out of 330 million, there's like 1,100, 1,500 cases a year. So obviously I'm good, right? Not a chance. Comes back, well, yeah, you win the lottery. I'm like, so this is in April in 19. And in front of my wife, he says, if I don't do surgery next Wednesday, this is a Wednesday, if I don't do surgery next week, you're dead in 6 weeks. Just.
What a bedside manner.
Yeah, wonderful bedside. He also complimented me on my shoes, though.
Huh.
He liked the shoes I was wearing.
Why do you want them in 6 weeks? He's like, hey, when you die, I'm going to get those shoes.
Well, I start asking questions. What's this going to be? What's this going to be? Because something's not feeling right. Not feeling right. I'm being pressured. And what's the outcome going to be? What are you going to do? And it turns out I could have. He didn't want to answer. But while I was under, he was just going to do whatever he felt like. So I could have had no tongue. I could have had no lower jaw. He was going to carve out half my throat. And I was like, and it was just too much cowboy. And so lucky enough to have some people, pull some strings. We get in to see Mayo. Mm-hmm. And that was either actually through Tim Ferriss. Tim got me hooked up with Peter Attia, who opened some doors for Mount Sinai if I want it. But Mayo and Sinai were pretty much seemed equal. And Sinai's, 20 minutes from my house. So I was like, no, I'll go to Mayo. And so they were nice. The first words out of their mouth was, no surgery. So I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. I said, yeah, it's way too big.
Oh, jeez.
Well, that sucks. I kind of went from, oh, that's awesome to, all right, you just got kicked in the NARS. And then all they wanted to do was poison and burn, chemo and radiation. And that's their whole business model.
Yeah.
And
that's what pays the bills.
That's what pays the bill. Every time I drive past Mayo, I watch all that new construction and the marble floors. I'm like, sons of bitches, man. Because what ended up working for me later, so I'd gone from stage 2 to stage 4 over the course of that year. And immunotherapy, the doc sits me down, and throat cancer is a bad thing. It's just a bad thing, right?
Not a smoker, no smokeless tobacco,
never,
nothing.
Nothing.
And that's so weird.
That
like all of a sudden, because if you look at throat cancer, there's all these risk factors associated with it.
Well, Val Kilmer just died and my cancer, but he was a heavy smoker. Yeah. So when we did the immunotherapy, and the doc sits me down, he's like, I want to, what's the word he used? I want to have reasonable expectations. He said, 1/3 get absolutely nothing from this. You need to know that. He said, 1/3 are going to get, we can measure it, but it's not a lot. He said, 1/3 get moderate. It'll buy you some time. He said, this is not, going to fix everything, but it'll at least mitigate it to an extent. Okay. And I'm here because I'm a really straightforward, pragmatic guy. And, this is terminal. It's done.
What year was this?
19. 19. So it's terminal. It's done. Okay. Well, most docs in that situation just close up shop.
Yeah.
They refuse treatment. People don't understand this. Most docs refuse the treatment.
Yeah.
Because the treatment sucks. So, part of the treatment plan was they're putting you into this giant iron sarcophagus with this iron mask on. And they're like, you're going to be I said, let's save us both some time. You and I both know that I'm not going in there without losing my shit, being locked in this. So you just give me some good shit right now and I'll be calm. That was the fastest 40 minutes. Actually, no, it was an hour and a half because they lie constantly. It'll be 40 minutes. Well, it will be, but it's 240 minutes. So they gave me something to chill me out. But we started immunotherapy. I've got a tumor the size of my fist, and there's just not room. There's just not room in your throat for that kind of tumor. And then a couple weeks later, it's like a treatment every 2 weeks, little 500 milliliter bag. I think that's right. And it's covered by insurance. It's one reason I'm pissed at Mayo, because it's standard of care. They never mentioned it. It's fully covered by insurance, but it's not part of their business model. You could see my tumor. You could see it. And so, and I've seen all kinds of, at this point, you've been all part of the cancer circles and the overreactions and all. And so I call my doc, a great doc in Phoenix there, Dr. Halapota, Palo Verde Cancer Center. And the only straight doc that I worked with the whole time, he was like my fourth doc. And didn't give me answers I liked, but was always honest and direct with me. And so I call him, I said, Doc, weird shit's going on. And I did not want to be that high maintenance hysterical patient. So I'm apologizing. So if you don't mind taking a look. So we go in, I'm just like, I hope I'm not an idiot. And he goes, wow, weird shit. So that just melted the tumor. It just melted it. It was just gone in like weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this was the drug, the chemo drug?
Yeah. No, it wasn't chemo. It was so immunotherapy.
So you said like a 500 milliliter
500 millimeter bag. I'm not sure.
Immunotherapy.
Yeah. And this particular drug, I forget if it was Opdivo or Opdiva. I want to say Opdiva.
I wonder if it increased bifidobacteria.
That'd be a good question. I will say I felt guilty.
You should. I'll introduce you to Dr. Sabine.
I would like that.
It'd be worth getting tested. I mean, what's so fascinating on her stuff, and I've looked at it for my wife and my kids, and we were going through the study, and then actually we just partnered to fund a study for kids with type 1.
Okay.
So we were able to
get an impact on diabetes, you think, with it?
We're testing the microbiome in kids under the age of 12 that have type 1 diabetes.
I've heard it related to autism also.
Yes. So there is, she had, thousands of kids in her study, and she actually in 2020 produced these results, and yet they still don't realize it. But
they realize, we'll call a spade a spade. They realize it. They're just going to bury it because it's not profitable.
Well, she went through and they were able to, and actually what the breakthrough was, they had 2 twin girls, identical, that both had autism. So she was able to test their biome and then hundreds of other kids and create like a signature of what it looks like, and then be able to put a treatment together for it based upon like this was high in this and this. So, I mean, really fascinating.
What kind of impact on the girls?
She sent me a video where they were nonverbal, and then sent me a video of these girls talking and singing. I mean,
what IQ did they end up with? So they were verbal. Did they get to fully functional? I'm just curious of little exponent. Okay.
Yeah, I would have to like pull up that stuff, but the video was, as a father, like it's
huge.
Yeah. So
it's huge.
But as we've gone through and looked at all these kind of different stuff, and she's shown me mine and this and the whole thing, like bifidobacteria, if bifidobacteria is high.
Where do we get it from naturally?
You actually get it from your parents.
Really?
Yeah. So when you're born, bifidobacteria is through the roof. And what happened, and the way this kind of, I guess, plays out is bifidobacteria decreases over age. So older parents that maybe have less diversity, less bifidobacteria, the kid is born with less bif.
Okay.
And then things like, everything destroys bifidobacteria, but,
that's
like,
great to hear.
Like
no matter what you do, you're
breastfeeding.
screwed.
raises bifidobacteria.
I heard about that. So that's the one that migrates from mom's butt biome up and then around the area of the nipple, not in the milk itself, but in the area around the nipple. So when the baby feeds, that picks it up initially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So gut diversity is a big one.
Okay.
So it was funny when Dr.
How do you supplement it?
With bifidobacteria?
Yeah.
There's a couple. This is fascinating.
Because I would imagine everyone should just assume you're low.
Well, so there's some different supplements that you can take that culture and benefit bifidobacteria, but one of them is there's some yogurts. There's actually one that I eat called Siggy's. That's from Iceland.
I've seen that one.
That she tested that actually has bifidobacteria.
Some of them I saw tested, they actually didn't have it. The people were lying their asses off.
I think 29 out of the 30.
Is that where I got it? Was from her? 29 out of 30.
30 of the she looked didn't have it, and a lot of the probiotics did not have it.
That kind of shit just infuriates me.
Well, I mean, there's no way to standardize. So
sure there is. We need a big guy like you with a baseball bat going to say hi.
Fuck these people up.
Either change your label or say hello to my youngest daughter says, say hello to my little friend.
Yeah. But one of those things, which is wild, is, low diversity, low bifidobacteria, bad things happen. But how and what bad things happen, that's So
you supplement with it. What do you eat? What does she say they like in the gut biome then to be healthy?
So the other thing that
because I would imagine they need, because I was told we don't eat the fiber for us. We eat the fiber in that to feed the biome for them to do their deal.
So two things that most of the population has almost no lactobacillus in the system. So lactobacillus
dairy-based
usually comes from fermented foods. Sourdough is lactobacillus, and then low bifidobacteria. So for me, I was low. I had good bifidobacteria, but I was low in lactobacillus. So then I started.
That's why you use the Siggy's.
I do the Siggy's, but I also crush a ton of sauerkraut, sour pickles, and I ate a ton of fermented foods.
What about histamine levels from a lot of the fermented?
I don't have any issues with it.
Okay.
I'm sure my wife has more histamine response.
Okay.
But for me, I'm like the robustness and just the durability of my gut.
So what you're saying is we should all hate you.
Yeah. Well, I was very lucky.
I'm okay. I'm flexible with that.
I've been exposed probably 200 times to COVID.
Okay.
I never got it, and I was never even tested for the antibodies. So when I got my blood work done, and when she did my stuff, she's like, "You've never had COVID."
Okay.
And I was like, "Yeah, we never had it." And she's like, "I'll tell you exactly why you." And then we went through my gut, and she's like, "Your bifidobacteria is high, your gut diversity, and you're high in all these things in here, and parasites."
But you've always eaten well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been,
and your diet's been consistent and steady.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it comes down to, sleeping well, mitochondrial density. I mean, aerobic base. I mean, the training, we live here. You just got to take a little bit of a tour.
Are you doing VO2 max?
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord, so much energy from that. I'm doing a weird one. I like to do 3 on, 3 off, 3 minutes on, 3 off. Yeah. But man, best I've felt in years and years.
Yeah. So we use this thing called Hypermax, where it's a machine that puts like 98% pure oxygen in a bag. Okay. And you put it on a mask, and I end up doing a bunch of sprint intervals. That's one of the ones we've tested. There's like a bunch of different ones. One of the other ones for mitochondria is we have a pulse PMF machine. So
I've done those. Those are interesting.
I'm a huge believer.
I've done some of that, and I found, isn't it strange you find? I like a very low setting instead of being aggressive and treating it like a workout, and then kind of get up and like, wow.
But so I consult for a billionaire here in Austin, and he likes to buy technology companies, especially like fitness techs. So I've gone with him to kind of do some AARs and just some evaluation. But we went to look at the Pulse PMF company, and I sat with them for 3 days, and the information that they've done in terms of like recharging mitochondria and basically like it's pretty cool. I kind of thought a lot of that shit was hokey, but there's something called the Schumann resonance, where the earth is struck by electricity, by lightning, like 50 times a second.
Really?
And what it effectively does is it creates a heartbeat of the earth. And this is how
you're a battery. So it makes sense. You're an electromagnetic battery.
If the lightning stops, every living thing on this planet's dead in 4 minutes. So this is how our hearts.
Can we do that? Can we arrange that selectively? I kind of have a list.
like I call it the Thanos effect, but it makes sense. Like, why does our heart beat? Like, where does this charge come from? We're charged in the earth, but then you think about, we don't sleep on the ground anymore. We don't bathe in running water like in rivers and streams.
Rubber-soled shoes.
We sleep on concrete. We don't get direct sunlight. So like the sun and the connection to the earth is how this thing gets charged. And I always thought that was hippy-dippy fucking bullshit. Sure. Right? Like I would joke with Nikki, Rob would always call her a dirt worshipping hippie. And so that's kind of like our code word. And I was like, that's like dirt worshipping hippie bullshit. But actually when I went to go meet with this guy and he was going through on like why this works the way it does and how it connects, I'm like, shit, man, like this makes so much sense. Like the direct sunlight. I mean, if you go back to like 1920 with the Warburg effect, the idea that cancer comes from the lack of mitochondria and the cells can't take energy anymore. So then they use fermentation to stay alive, fermenting glucose and glutamine. And that's where cancer comes from. And that it's not a genetic or disease, but it's more something that comes from mitochondrial dysfunction. 1920, a guy won a Nobel Prize. I don't know if he was perfect in it, but like that's actually
kind of funny how that got. I was
well, then that got buried, and they went to better pharmacology.
So,
yeah, I mean, if you want to look that
Apple makes $90 billion a year, and it's one of the largest companies in the world. Cancer in the United States, $140 billion a year. They have no interest in correcting this.
So there's my buddy Tom Incledon has his company Causent out in Scottsdale, and they do a lot of the work with a lot of cancer patients. And Tom was telling me that there was a cancer clinic he went and visited that does something like $100 million a year. They have a 99% death rate.
100%.
He's like
100%.
Every 100 people walk through, 99 die. They only cure one. And he goes, they have people fighting to get in there, and they print money.
I watched Mayo sending people out with cases of Ensure on their shoulder. These people are just wasted from their chemo, nothing, husband carrying a case, so they're just pumping them full of sugar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's that Warburg effect. Like, I mean, what you saw for, going on a ketogenic diet, the idea is... I had to. If
I had carbs, so where my tumor was, sorry, it'll be gross, just buckets of blood, puking it out. And just had to stay away from carbs and sugar and that. Good Lord, it was just, and you get used to it. So I just tell the family, excuse me, we're in the middle of a family movie, go spit out my blood and then come back. But Rob kept me alive with that high fat stuff.
When I retired from the NFL, I think I was having some neurological issues. Like something was a little off. I wasn't nearly as intelligent as I used to be. And I remember when I actually found a computer and I went through and I was looking at like my graduate thesis for my master's, and I was reading it, and it was as if somebody else wrote it because I knew I couldn't write that way anymore.
Interesting.
And I, as I became friends with Rob and kind of connected, I remember I called Rob and I recounted something to him, and then I called him like a couple hours later.
Recounted
it again, and he's like, "Hey, dude, you already called and we talked about this." I'm like, "We did," and he's like, "Man, we got to do something about this." So I had been reached out to by Dr. Amen to be in his study on, concussions and CTE and all that deal. So I went through all their scans and everything. And he goes, the part of your brain that's damaged is up here on the left frontal lobe.
Okay.
And this part doesn't light up. And he showed me the brain mapping and went through everything. And he's like, this is, this part of the brain deals with sympathy and empathy and kind of went through. And he's like, based upon the,
as a pro athlete, you're already low in those characteristics.
Well, it was funny.
I can't afford to lose anymore.
Because as we went through like all like the like the interviews and the exams, right? Like so they had like the clinical stuff. We're going to do the mapping and the CT scans and the whole deal. But then also you meet with a therapist and you kind of grade you. And he's like, you were really low on the charts of this. He goes,
don't mention that shit to my wife.
Well,
she's gonna
they were like, we got good news and bad news. And I was like, well, what's the bad news? He's like, well, you were really low on the deal with like, like here's the damage to your brain, sympathy and empathy, really low. You probably have like the sympathy and empathy of like a third grader. And I was like, oh, all right. Well, what was the good stuff?
That just means you're pure of heart.
I said, what was the good stuff? And he goes, you were the smartest guy we had tested. And I was like, ever? And
So
he's
you
like,
feel less sharp than ever.
Yeah.
But you're the smartest they've ever seen.
yeah. But I was like, ever? He's like, no, in the NFL study. I'm like, that's like being like the smartest kid in the dumb class, right?
There you go.
So I was like, okay, well, two things. One, thank you. Two, can I get a note that's saying that I have this disability that deals with sympathy and empathy? Because my mom and my wife are never going to fucking believe this. So as I was driving away, I called Rob.
Can I get a copy of that note?
Yeah, I'll write you one. I called Rob, and we conferenced in Matt Lalonde.
Why do I know that name?
Matt Lalonde was a buddy of Rob's. I
remember him. Yeah.
PhD doctor, research at Harvard. And so Matt was kind of big on the nutrition scene, and then just kind of realized he doesn't like dealing with the general population and just kind of faded back, which is perfect for him.
Okay.
But I reached out and I was like, hey, I'm having this problem. And Matt was like, hold on. And he, struck up his band of merry men and all of his research assistants, and it was like, pull everything. And he called me back and said, for not only acute, but also chronic brain injury, similar to what you're doing, ketogenic diet seems to have a really good result. So I put a game. Is
that a healing or is that a rewiring? Do they know?
I think it was maybe a little bit of like rewiring, but also maybe reduction of inflammation.
Okay.
Is kind of what I thought.
Okay.
So that moment on, we kind of put a game plan together, and I didn't eat a carb for a year.
Really?
Yeah. It was literally, I would eat like crock-pot meat, chicken. I mean, it was like, I didn't eat a vegetable. I didn't eat a piece of fruit. It was like olive oil and meat and coconut oil. And that was it. And drink water. I did drink some tequila. Yeah, we were drinking tequila, I think, because Rob said that was paleo.
I was going to say that's a low carb though.
Yeah, it was zero carb. Okay. And
does it count that the alcohol is processed like a carb in the liver, even though it's not a carb?
I think we did, but I didn't drink very often.
Okay.
And the reason being is I drank enough when I was an NFL player, but I'm saying that we did drink very sparingly. But I did not consume rice, potato, nothing, no carb.
Nothing.
And
veg?
Nothing.
So just pure, what were you eating?
I ate meat, and I would supplement with olive oil or coconut oil or bone marrow. Or
so
butter.
no dairy either. Butter was the only dairy?
Yeah, we did a little bit of, I think I did a little bit of dairy, but not much. And I did
eggs?
Eggs, yes. Bacon, yes.
Seafood, stuff like that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, fish.
And then how long for the healing?
I did it for 12 months.
12 months.
And I went up and visited Rob for their anniversary right around New Year's. And I remember, like, I sat down and Rob's like, we had ribs.
Did he jerk your chain and say, we've had this conversation before?
No. I came up and he's like, man, you're so much better. I felt like I was losing my friend. And we went out and bought Japanese sweet potatoes and pork ribs. And I remember I ate like 3 Japanese sweet potatoes.
Okay.
And I went over and laid on laid on their futon, and I had like the best sleep I'd had in like probably 10 years.
Okay.
And that was kind of what started that healing for me. It was very impactful. But I also realized that I can, if you remove the stimulus, or let's say the negative stimulus, like obviously the impacts to the brain. And the other one that was kind of interesting, and I look back on now, our social and maybe our coping mechanism in the NFL is alcohol. I wasn't
same in military.
I wasn't a pill guy, and a lot of guys I played with.
Upper level athletics too, even gymnastics. Amazing to see how many great athletes smoke like a chimney and drink like you've never seen.
Well, in the NFL, there's 2 types, right? So some guys are kind of like a lot of guys smoke marijuana, but a lot of guys get hooked on pills.
Okay.
And so it was like bikes and this. I was never a pill guy. Like I took them on a few occasions, but like they made me feel sick, so I never took them.
I was surprised to see how many spec op guys kind of go down that rabbit hole.
Oh yeah. So a lot of guys.
Just everything hurts, but you still got to perform.
Yeah. So for me, this was kind of wild. I wonder if this is just part of my wiring. For some reason, the pain didn't bother me the same way it bothered other people. I always viewed pain a lot like an old friend coming to visit. Like, oh, sit down, old friend. We're going to talk for a little bit, and then you're going to get up. So I almost made peace with it, whereas a lot of people ran from it. I just kind of embraced it, and it was how I knew I was alive.
It's just there.
It was just there. And I could kind of realize it and kind of compartmentalize.
Kind of more like you said, more of the guys that come up abused. Whatever.
So it was wild. After I retired, I ran into one of my former teammates, and his first question to me was like, how you doing? Everything's good. And he's like, did you have a hard time getting off the pills? And I was like, I never took the pills. He's like, dude, I was like 7 to 10 or 12 of these a day. He's like, I had a hell of a time getting off, and I know a lot of guys. And this is just purely observation. Actually, I did talk to Peter Attia about this, and he did not co-sign. But just one of the observations I made was that the guys that seem to take the most amount of pills seem to have the most amount of neurological problems today. And I've always felt that maybe the opiates end up destroying some of the blood-brain barrier.
So I wouldn't take anything during cancer. Right? Tumor's grown, it's wrapping around almost into the brain. This ear had gone dead. It's all nasty shit, right? But I wouldn't take any pain medication. And then finally, after about 3 months of just, everyone else is going to bed at night. It's like, fuck, excuse the language, but another night. There's these endless nights of just agony. So finally I'm like, and it's terminal. Yeah. So finally I'm like, well, you're kind of being an idiot. You're dead anyway. So, but I did 5 milligrams of oxy. And then of course, tumor goes away later. So, well, I'll just stop. Now, if other people were doing 30 at a pop, I was shocked how hard that oxy was. I said, I'll just stop. No, you won't. You won't just stop. It's impossible to just stop. And I remember apologizing to the doc, said, I don't know what the hell this is. This is weird. And they'd seen it so many times. They were like, so I just started every other day, cutting pills, cutting to half, and finally down to a quarter, skipping every other day. But even with me being like the most stubborn SOB to walk the planet, I was like, wow, if I'm having this much trouble with 5, what about these poor bastards that did 30?
So there's a story about Brett Favre. I know he's in the media with that weird thing in Mississippi, but I had a buddy, they were at a dinner, like a team dinner after, and Favre was going around, he was bumming pills off of guys, because some guys like have injuries in this, and I guess he had probably about 30 of these things, and he had been popping them. He kind of puts his head between his knees and vomits and throws them all up right on the ground. And one of the guys said he was watching him pick the Vicodins out of the vomit and put them back in his mouth and eat them. They knew the low point.
Yeah, that's a pretty low point.
That story always kind of resonated. I mean, one, it's fucking, that's terrible. But I mean, there's some interviews. If you guys go on YouTube, you can look at Aaron Rodgers where he got hurt and they brought him in and brought him out. You can see his fucking eyes are all like this, and he goes out and plays this great game. It's just part of the deal. They used to.
That's not reflecting well on football players that I play better when I'm wasted.
So my 4th year, I took a helmet to the shin, broke my fibula clean in half.
Really?
Yeah, they carted me off. They casted me 5 days. I played 3 weeks later.
So, what?
Yeah.
How the hell does that work?
You don't need that bone to play football. It's only 12% weight bearing.
Yeah, unless you want to go sideways.
Yeah. So I played 17 weeks with a broken leg, and every time I took a step, I could feel the bone moving. And so one of the docs that we had was actually an ex-Army doc. He was...
That's not a good thing.
He was one of the guys that had developed, he was a psychiatrist, had developed the playlist that they had blasted for Noriega to get him out of the house.
Really?
Yeah. Welcome to the Jungle in speakers.
I kind of like this
guy. I used to call him Dr. Squiggy because he looked like Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley. So I see Squiggy and he's like, how your leg feeling? I'm like, man, it hurts. He's like, well, let me give you this. So he gives me a Darboset. I take it. And my leg's feeling better. And I kind of like, I'm sitting on the bench and he's like, how you feeling? I'm like, man, I feel really tired. He's like, take this. So he gave me this. And all of a sudden I like woke up and I felt great. And I went out there and crushed it. And he gave me an Adderall.
Okay.
And he's like, let me write you a script. And so I would take a Darboset.
A lot of spec up guys. I'm tired. I can't sleep. I need to wake up. And then whiskey for everything.
Painkiller. I think it was Ritalin or Adderall. And I was like, fine. Played 17 weeks with that broken leg. And
how the heck does it heal?
It just healed. The only problem was somewhere around week 7, week 8, I ruptured my calf. So I thought I got kicked. How do you
rupture a calf?
Somehow they think what happened was the bone was splintered in and caused a spasm, and it felt like I got kicked. And when I came out, I'm like, I got kicked in the calf really bad. And they're like, well, can you get up on your toes? So I got up on my toes. And I was running. I was like, I feel fine. It just feels like a bad Charlie horse and a cat kicking my calf. They're like, oh, you're fine. It went out there. I came in the next day and I'll show you. I literally, like, my gastroc kit basically rolled up behind my knee.
I've seen that, but usually you lose function.
No, I didn't. I was still able to do everything, still run and play.
Maybe you had no function to lose.
So then the hilarious part is they're like, hey, we can go do surgery and fix it, or you can just keep playing with it and it just kind of will kill your bodybuilding career. Had I known that people on YouTube would attack and be like, why is that guy's calf small? I'd be like, I should have got the surgery. Damn it, it's ruined my bodybuilding career. But this has been a weird thing in my life. For some reason, my body has found a way to execute tasks when it shouldn't. Like, break the leg, I'll just figure it out. Rupture a calf, I can still play. Like, I've always just had this weird ability to, like, almost like
resilience.
Well, it's resilience or compensate around these things. Whereas, somebody tears an ACL, oh, I can't walk. Like, I could still train without it. So this, like, weird compensation pattern. And
we'd get people coming in. I want to prep for selection. Yeah, we can. We can do this and that. I said, but it's probably not going to matter. Like, what do you mean? I said, well, you were kind of born for it or you weren't born for it. And the most perfect prep in the world's not going to matter if your body can't tolerate that environment. You mentally can't tolerate it. It's not going to matter. You're kind of, years ago, one of my really good friends was in for 10 years for SEALs. And he was the one that first said, it doesn't matter. How do I prep? Do whatever you want. Well, but I've got to be able to, whatever. Because they have Olympians bail.
Well, all the guys that I know that passed buds had the most fun time. They were like, it was great. We get to run, we get to eat, we get to do this. I mean, like, I've heard guys be like, man, it was great. I'd do it all over again.
Nice.
And then there's other guys that are, hey, like it wasn't
abuse.
as terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like if you had a nice supportive life, then of course any stress sucks. But I remember going in the military and I was like, wow, new clothes. I'm eating 3 times a day. Everyone around me is bitching and carrying on. I'm like at a resort. This is awesome.
There's a great story. Do you know Kirk Parsley?
No, just through Rob,
okay.
But I haven't met him.
So Doc Parsley, one of my favorite humans on the planet, and one of my emergency contacts for everything. Okay. So he, at 18, he gets in the military and becomes a SEAL, and they finally called him in, and they're like, hey, we got to talk to you about something. He goes in there. He's like, you haven't cashed any of your paychecks. And he's like, I get paid for this? He was like, but you guys are giving me a place to live. You're giving me food and clothes, and I get to do this, and I get paid? And they were like, yeah, dipshit. You have to cash these fucking paychecks. And he was like,
how long had he been?
I forgot exactly. I'd be disingenuous for me to say, but
because you get free housing, you get free food. He
was like,
especially if you're single.
I didn't know I was getting paid.
That's funny.
That is Parsley to a T. Doc is the smartest. He has no perception of time. Okay. So I'm pretty sure
that's funny for a guy who wants you to spend lots of time sleeping and be careful to sleep.
Yeah, but Doc's perception of time is a little off. Okay. And but one of the best human beings, and if the whole world went to shit, I'd probably call Parsley, and Parsley would be like, yeah, I'll be over in 10 minutes. We're gonna have to kill a lot of people. Okay, I'll be there. Doc is the best. I've had him on this podcast, and I love him because he never up, never down. Just
mellow,
just straight. I
steady.
mean, he's so knowledgeable. But also never going to say anything polarizing.
Really,
yeah. Pragmatic. You brought up this is the way it is, right? You have to sleep. You have to do this and this and this. And so I think that there's other people. I mean, as
they want to justify it.
Well,
instead of this is what you got to do.
An expert that I sometimes wonder if you're too much of an expert. That you got to be a little bit of a bullshitter. You got to have a little bit of that magician in you. And
that's true. They do the rank and file, like the Dog and Pony Show.
Well, I mean, people will take medical advice from Tim Ferriss.
That's a good point.
It's
a good point.
He's not a doctor, but you have a guy who's the SEAL doc. Was a SEAL doc and knows more about hormones. And yet
That drove me insane going into fitness from national team for that very reason.
Dude.
I'm a fucking national team coach.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for decades. I want you to do this and then this and this. But. No. One of us in this conversation is a national team coach. For those who didn't figure that out, it's not you. I want you to do this. Well, you're mean.
Yeah.
And I think, and this guy over here with the purple shorts, he says I can do what I want. It's like, I hate the fitness industry.
Yeah. Well, it's so the internet's interesting, especially social media, right? There's this idea that everybody should have a voice, which is fine. Yes. Everybody should have the right to say what they want, but I also have the right to think you're an asshole.
100%.
And not everybody's opinion weighs the same.
Thank you.
Right? Like there's constantly things all the time. I see people talk about offensive line play of football and this, and I like, they just don't have a basis to understand it. And you look at it and you're like, that's completely wrong and a terrible understanding. But me going in and arguing with them or being like, I don't think your base, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like the age old, like you argue with fools, they tend to pull you down.
I was just going to say that if you're arguing with a fool, you just prove there's two.
Yeah. Like all of a sudden, Glassman's over there trying to eviscerate you and you're like, you fabricated your entire gymnastics experience, which I think is great, is that you called to check his fucking records. And
that's why Rob and I became good buddies, because Glassman was he was going off. And we had this big debate, and it went on and on and on. It was in writing. And Rob was like, Coach, I've never seen anyone out debate Glassman. I said, well, it wasn't hard. If you guys would fucking use a dictionary, you'd understand that half the words he uses them wrong.
Yes.
And he constantly is just changing course on you guys. Yes. Anything you say he doesn't like, he'll just pretend. Yeah, he'll pivot. It's a perfect word. And I just bring him back. No, we were discussing this. I don't care what you had for breakfast. We're discussing this. Yeah. Well, you only say that because you were abused as a child and you're wearing the wrong. I don't care. We're discussing this. Yep. Yeah, that's where Rob and I became buddies, was from that.
Yeah.
He left CrossFit because of me.
Yeah.
He left.
Yeah, first time.
It was behind the scenes, and innocent Greg's paranoid. Greg's paranoid. You know that. And so Greg Everett had asked me, weightlifter, had asked, I don't even remember the name of his newsletter.
It was one that he and Rob Performance Menu.
Performance Menu. He had asked me on the CrossFit board in a private DM, Coach, would you write an article for me? Sure. They monitored the DMs.
Of course.
Now, Greg said, someone CC'd me. Bullshit. It was between, Glassman said that. It was between Greg Everett and I. Greg somehow interpreted that we were plotting against him and we're going to go do our own CrossFit. Well, one, it was an article for a magazine. And two, the fuck are you doing in our private messages? And it turned into this. He turned around then and he CC'd like 7 or 9 people on his team.
That was a very common tactic of him.
I turned around and did the same thing.
To start CCing random
people. I just brought people in. He's like, what the fuck are you inviting other people for? I said, well, one, you established precedents. I didn't establish the precedents. So if you don't like what I just did in response to you doing it, maybe you should reconsider not doing it in the future.
Yeah.
But I was a national team coach, and finally, most in my mind, most frustration and the anger from it is from, we can't force someone to do what we want them to do. Yeah. So I can't force Greg to do what I want. Plus it's CrossFit.
Yeah.
I'm a national team coach.
Yeah, it's adult fitness.
I don't give a fuck, and I didn't sign up for this bullshit.
So, Rob and Greg have that big falling out at the Black Box Summit. Yeah. And one of the first calls that Greg and his team, this is hilarious, they call me and asked me to basically publicly eviscerate Rob. And we were partners in Paleo Brands. which we had just started our food company. And
so you're not there, and Glassman has the balls to call you. Wow. He's a piece of work.
Cancel a seminar. If you stab him in the back and throw him out of the company, I'll do this, and basically makes all these promises. Now, mind you, he calls me on the phone, and he's conferenced in like 7 people. There's like lawyers and all these people on this. And as he starts yelling, I just hung up on him.
Good for you.
And then he called me back, but it took him like 5 minutes to get everybody back on the call. Okay. And then he starts again. And just as he gets going, I hung up again. And then the third time he calls back, and I was like, first of all,
John,
do whatever you want.
Before you go farther, I just have to say, you and I are going to get along really well.
So we get back into this, and I was like, first of all, I'm not stabbing one of my closest friends in the back. And 2, do whatever with what you want. If you want to cancel this thing, whatever. Like, I would much rather have my friends and be able to look myself in the eye than stab people in the back, and especially somebody that's been to as good as Rob. And, you're a piece of shit for the fact that, we ended up, that was literally the severing of our relationship.
Was it?
But what was crazy was that CrossFit football, the seminar I was teaching, had grown so big and was so, was such a good deal that I ended up keeping and teaching it almost in spite, like a girlfriend and boyfriend that don't like each other anymore, but they just hang around because nobody will break up with them. That's what we did. And I just went on the road and taught and tried to do as well as I could.
How long did that last?
That was like 6 or 7 years.
You're kidding.
Yeah, we did it through 2016, 2017. So this was probably...
You are way more civilized than I am.
Wow. I just...
Good for you. I'm too childish with that stuff. I'm like, no is no. You don't exist anymore.
No,
good for you.
I have the ability to, and I think this comes from playing football. I played with guys I didn't like.
Okay.
Right. Like, like I didn't have to necessarily like you as a person, even though I liked a lot of the guys, but like, I didn't have to like you. I didn't have to like your family and whatever bullshit you were into or whatever you wanted to do. I didn't have to like dial into any of that.
Okay.
I had the ability to just sit down and be like, we have a common goal. Let's go execute it. And I can see past that stuff. And I also liked the fact that I felt the longer, like, what Greg likes to do is eviscerate and push people away because he can't stand to see his own kind of like mediocrity in it. Mm-hmm. So I think the longer I stayed around and the better friends I was with Rob, the actual worse it was for me when I did get to see him.
Nice.
And that all culminated at a big meeting we had up in, there was a big SME, big debacle fucking infighting. So we went to this big deal.
What's there to fight about?
Well, they were upset about a bunch of shit. They wanted more, just whatever. So we went to this big meeting up in Arizona at the Four Seasons, and the whole thing kind of fucking...
You guys were in my Arizona?
Yeah. Dude, turned into a Mexican standoff.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Like, we were across the table ready to burn this whole thing to the fucking ground. And they were like, you know what? Let's talk about this tomorrow. Why don't we just end it here? And and it was Rob and Nikki. This is pre-Black Box. So we end up going to going out to the pool. And so I'm with Rob and Nikki and a bunch of like Kelly Starrett and us. We're at this SME thing, and we're having some drinks, having a good time in the pool. We have a couple margaritas. Glassman shows up and his wife and all like the brain bugs, the sycophants all show up.
Sycophants is the right word, dude.
Yeah. And so as I'm in the pool standing there, the waitress walks over to Greg and says, "Oh, Mr. Glassman, great to see you. Is your wife here?" And he points to Lauren. "Yeah, she is." And she goes, No, the dark-haired lady." All of a sudden, the room goes fucking quiet. I mean, not the room, just everybody.
The area.
Like, you could have heard a pin drop. And like, I'm standing there and Lauren kind of like puts her head down and I can see like the tear. And I was like, all right, let's go. And like, it was
Lauren can't really say much. Wasn't she dating that murderer in prison?
Yeah. Well, I think that they were all fucking around on the side, but the fact that she got kind of humiliated, like
publicly, and that was kind of a brainless waitress.
I think the cheating or whatever, the intermarriage.
I heard it was rampant.
Yeah, it was, but I think that like being outed in front of the company like that was a big thing. So then we go to dinner that night and it's real uncomfortable, and then Greg goes face down in the soup and they carry him out. That was
really
fun. Yeah. He got absolutely shit faced at dinner and went face down into his into his appetizer. At which point we proceeded to drink about $10,000 worth of really expensive wine, which was awesome. We had a great time. But like those moments, it was so dysfunctional.
Sure.
And I'm like, the fact that this
and
guy's
that pivoting from charming to just vicious, and charming and vicious.
I've never been around anybody who was so charismatic and such a great speaker, but then all of a sudden, you go by, the demons come in and this and the paranoia, and like fucking.
Yeah. He could play to the crowd well, but he was terrible one-to-one.
So I said, you put him in front of 300 people and the guy comes to life one-on-one. You're like, is this the same person? Yeah.
You kind of see, behind the curtain, he's playing a good character, but we're missing some foundation here.
Well, he came out with his COVID-19, and as you said, the most honest thing he ever said.
Floyd-19.
Floyd-19, that's what it was.
I couldn't believe it. It's the only honest thing he'd said in 20 years, and he goes down for it. It's like, wow, karma is a bitch. Look at this.
I think people were at home, and they were in lockdown. And when that guy he had fucked over enough people over the years.
Viciously.
That when they saw the opportunity to bury a knife, everybody sharpened and put him in his bag.
Okay.
And then he ends up selling his company for $200 million, which.
Poor bastard.
Yeah, couldn't happen to a better guy. But I honestly think the money isn't as important as the notoriety for him.
Well, sure it would be.
Being marginalized.
Have you noticed? Did you go through this? When I was young, before I was successful, very hungry for attention, notoriety, recognition, chip on the shoulder. But then once you're there and you keep repeating success at that level, it's kind of like, okay, whatever. And it kind of, for me, it shifted from chasing the winning, chasing the titles, all that stuff, to enjoying the craft, the art of it.
I wish I could go back and give the 20-something-year-old John a little bit of advice and being like, none of this shit matters. Like you said, attention to the craft, attention to detail. All this stuff that you think is important and here and this guy makes this and this, like none of this matters.
Yeah.
I didn't learn that until later. And the other fascinating thing, and I've had enough time to reflect it with 800 plus podcasts, but I think I was always afraid to really enjoy it because I was so terrified that one day it would be over.
It'd be over. And
then I wouldn't be able to do what I really enjoyed. Okay. And I think because of that, I always had this interesting 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I wouldn't go
step on a step that's not there.
Yeah. I think I'd go back and be like, really enjoy this. Take advantage of it. Stop rushing. Stop doing this. Realize what you're doing. This is just going to be a small segment in your life, but suck the marrow out of it. The age old.
Good way to say it.
I like that. Like the Dead Poets Society, when they asked Robin Williams, what does it mean to be a dead poet? And he's like, somebody that snaps the bone and sucks the marrow out of life. I wish I had understood that when I was playing, and almost this fear of one day it's going to be end and I'm going to be sad that I don't get to do this anymore. But then realizing that it's not for a lifetime, it's for a season. Sure. I wish and so all the young
phases of life, seasons of life.
I've been very fortunate to mentor a bunch of younger athletes, like the JITS guys and Will Fries, who's gone on and done well. And one of the things I try to explain to them is take advantage of everything, enjoy this moment, because when you're, in your 40s and in your 50s, looking back, you don't want to feel that you didn't do something.
Undone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kid from, I don't know if you saw that deal with the NIL with that kid who was a quarterback from Tennessee, where
something about it. I didn't pay much attention.
So he's making $2 million a year. He wanted $4 million a year and wanted a Bugatti that was $4.5 million or whatever. And he was didn't show up for spring practice and this whole deal. So Tennessee cut ties with him. And then one of the reports came out that this kid never showed up to any of the autograph signings, never showed up to anything, was extremely difficult to deal with, and didn't participate in any way and actually acted too good for it. And I think that's a sign of youth. Like I said, suck the marrow, go
too much success too soon.
Or just not understanding, having somebody around and being you need to go to all this.
You need to go to all of
it. That while you're making this money, there's a an invisible popularity contest that's happening, and it's you with yourself.
I like that.
You know, and what you want to do is you want to have, if you're going to go in and renegotiate this thing, you need every fan on your side because you stayed after and signed every autograph. That's something that I learned from the WWE guys and from early in my NFL career when we were in Philly. Tommy Canavy, the Colonel, who was one of my strength coaches, was one of the Rock strength coaches at Miami. So whenever those guys would come to town, they always come lift weights with us. And he would give us tickets and we'd go to the WWE deal. And what was amazing was that when we walked through the tunnel, there was like the Make-A-Wish kids and like, you know, there's always people there. Every one of those wrestlers stopped and talked to every one of those kids and signed every autograph.
See, I love that.
And that was always impressive to me that those guys, you know, like they're doing that 300 nights a year. It's one of the reasons
I won't watch NBA anymore. Just that entitled behavior. The fans don't matter. Wait. You don't have a career without fans.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry. You're not a soldier.
I like watching college basketball. I can't watch the fucking
Thank
NBA.
you. I took my wife, it's been some years back, but they had Final Four in town in Phoenix. So we got courtside seats and I'm so in my own little bubble. I had Kevin Durant sitting next to me. I didn't know it was Kevin. Yeah. I was just chatting and Kurt Warner, my wife was giving me shit. She's like, you know, neither one of them were impressed that you were right here, that, hey, Coach Sommer's here. Yeah, rub it in, woman. Rub it in.
Dude, you know what's hilarious is I put together 14 questions for this and we've been talking for like a long time. But I have to ask you.
See, my wife, I told my wife, I said, I think John likes 1 hour episode, and she just started laughing.
No, I don't like 1 hour episodes. we Jacob, what do you think? We average what?
We average in person 2 hours at least.
At least, if not longer.
If in person, yeah.
Okay.
We're at 2 hours and 20 minutes right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I got to hit you with a couple of these questions. So the one is nature versus nurture. How do we balance the training when someone just doesn't have the genetics but desire to work? But we covered that.
Because it's both. It's both. It's both. So I can't develop what's not there. I can't. And so everywhere I've ever been, in any state, in any gym, I've always put athletes on the US national team. Always. So does that mean, because the first one you say, well, you just got lucky, you landed in a pocket of talent. Mm-hmm. But no, there's talent everywhere. What there's a shortage of are high-level coaches to develop that talent. You know, and the flip side applies too. It doesn't matter what I know without the right training situation, the right gym, the right environment, the right admin support, the right athlete, and the parents. Everyone has to be on the same page. Because what I've learned is that if the parents and I aren't on the same page, it'll work when the athlete's young. When they become teenagers, it's done. Mm-hmm. And I've wasted 6,000 hours. Wow. You know, so a lot of times they don't realize that they think the athlete's coming to, you know, try out. Parents are trying out also. You know, it's not as we've seen here. I like to talk. I'm always open to hearing a new perspective, as long as it can be supported. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't like flying off into the weeds for no reason. But so, you know, as long as the parents and I, we share values, it'll work long term. It'll work long term. If they don't match, then no, I won't even start. I won't even start.
How does bodyweight training contribute to long-term athleticism and health?
So I had done a private seminar for the Marine Recon instructors. So I went down to Pendleton, and I'd been working for some months with a gunny wolf. So I set up a 3-day, and we do our first day, and they're just in shock. I bring some of my athletes, and they're used to being the studs, the recon guys are. And so I bring my athletes. Well, the ones I brought weren't even national team guys. And the recon guys can't keep up. They're not even remotely close. And they're just shocked the first day. The second day, they're sullen because the beatdown just continued. Right? And I'm not beating them down physically. I'm showing holes that they've been lacking in their physical preparation. This is your guys' life. This is the demands of your occupation. Yeah, you're not doing prep for your low back, for your hips, for your knees. You've got heavy rucks. I don't see anything for thoracic. I don't see shoulder prep, your rotator cuff shot. I mean, the reason you guys are having all these issues is because you've not been attentive. And then the third day, they were okay. But sometime during those 3 days, I call Jeff, a buddy of mine who did 10 years in SEAL and then was in green team for going into dev group. And I was like, don't get me wrong. I called Jeff. I said, they're not what I expected. He said, how so? I said, I expected more. I said, I said, I'm not trying to be dismissive, but I expected a much higher level of athlete. And Jeff was the one, he said, you're a level early. You're expecting tier 1 capacity, right? And so we work with them at that time. So when I was in the services were separate. And just when I was getting out, they had started JSOC and that, and they started having those lateral transfers.
Sure.
So Gunny Wolf was going to, or whatever it's called now. It was always Delta when I was in, so it's still Delta. Yeah. I think it's CAG now.
Yeah.
But Gunny wrote me a really nice after action. He didn't make it through. He made it to the Thursday before the final Saturday. And I'd only had about 7 months with Gunny. And he said it was all joint prep. Joint prep's what's made the difference. It's broken terrain. And what he had found was that the high performers who went through selection well had the highest degree, not of absolute strength, but the highest degree of relative strength. And so, which kind of makes sense athletically, because I could move a massive amount of weight, but if I'm not as effective at moving my own body, now I'm not effective on the field of play.
Sure.
And then if I'm only good at body weight, but I break down, so, Mark Twight, for example, really, really good at moving through the mountains under a light load, right? And amazing, right? A legend. But you put load on Mark and he breaks down, right? So to be successful in selection, what Gunny noticed is that super high degree of relative strength was just essential. Just essential. So JJ. So one of my athletes was national champ on rings, 5'5", 135. And this would have been back somewhere mid-90s, maybe 94, somewhere in there. And maybe 95. I think it was definitely before Atlanta Olympics. And JJ has to take he gets really lucky. He's got to take a high school weightlifting class. And he happens to have a guy who's badass, who's good. He's good. Well, JJ pulled a triple bodyweight deadlift the first time he ever touched the bar. Right? I didn't know that was a big deal when I started writing. So I just knew JJ went 135, he pulled 405, triple bodyweight. Shh, you are a lion SOB, coach. I was like, what are you talking about? Right? This is what he pulled. I never did find out. I didn't have the good belts and chains then. I never did find out what his 1 rep max chin would have been.
Yeah.
It snapped. My belt snapped. When they get into advanced degrees, and now everyone's going to want to go, to their mind, body weight means pull-ups, dips, push-ups, and that. They don't understand that in terms of strength, not plyometric, not athletic development, but in terms of strength, it's the ring strength. That's the moneymaker, right? I've seen guys walk into a gym. Well, for the longest time, the strength records at University of Nebraska were owned by the gymnasts, which really surprised me. I was like, well, I expected wrestlers.
Yeah.
Right? I expected the wrestlers, but no, it was all the gymnasts. And it was all the hang clean stuff they don't train. And so I went through a phase where I was bringing in Olympic coaches for the guys. Well, all my guys started with jerking body weight. So I was like, well, if they're already doing what other people spend years and years to go, I don't really see the long-term payoff. I could do more. We could do it, but why? How is this going to increase performance? And so once you start getting into that straight arm ring, I think so I had maybe, this is a good segue actually. I want to say it was 2017, maybe 2018. I get a call, first name Cole, from SEAL Team 6 operator. I forget who he tracked me down through. And wanted to visit. Fine. I'm always happy to talk training. I love it. And he shared a story with me. He said, my brother had a chronically damaged back. And, just was looking at a lifetime of diminished function. Came across your protocols. In a year, fixed his back. He says, Coach, we want this. We want this. And then put together protocols for him. Spent a lot of time in just before. And I never charge these guys. I just cover my expenses, cover my staff expenses to get out there, and it's good enough. We've got enough other money coming on the side, right? So just before we were ready to go out, the guys, and I like the guy's material, but he really caused me some issues. He wrote the book Stealing Fire. A guy named Martin something.
I've never heard of it.
He's good. He's bright. He's sharp. He's succinct. He's articulate. He also broke his NDA with SEAL Team 6.
Oh, he did, huh?
And
Stealing Fire, how Silicon Valley, what is it? Stealing Fire, how Silicon Valley, the Navy SEALs, and maverick scientists are revolutionizing the way we live and work. Yeah. Oh, it's Stephen Kotler.
Oh, I get it wrong. It was not Martin, Stephen.
No, it was Stephen Kotler, who we had him on the podcast for his, what was the book that he wrote that it came, it was The Flow State.
Okay.
Yeah, we had him
I thought that was a CZ guy, a Eastern European guy. Flow. There's another one, Flow.
God, what was the book that Stephen Kotler? Yeah, The Art of Impossible.
Okay.
I think we had him on for that one, but
anyway, I like his material, but he had broken his NDA, or at least SEAL Team 6 felt that he had. So all contracts that were in action at that time got frozen. And so we never did make it out, but I'd already spent a lot of time on this program for these guys. And so as I was down with cancer, I'm wired a little weird in that I never went through the denial or the anger or
the why me.
Yeah, I didn't even realize I didn't until Tim pointed it out.
I think that's indicative of people that battle it, because my wife is the same way.
She's the same.
Do you remember that terrible G.I. Jane SEAL movie? Do you remember when the guy goes up and he quotes? He's like, I never saw a wild thing feel sorry for itself. I've seen birds freeze and fall. I know that poem, and I think it's funny that Ego Mortensen, uses it in G.I. Jane, as he's wearing the UDTs and the whole deal. But I think that's one of the things I've noticed about people with resilience, where there's there's that feeling of, I'm not sad. I don't feel pity. I just want to, fight through this thing.
I'm going to be productive.
Yeah.
So I spent that time just working. Family was already dialed in. Money's back. Tons of money, life insurance is good, but I just wanted to make things even better more. And so I just worked, and where it ended up was this really nice hybrid program. I'm actually pretty pleased with it. We'll sometimes this next year for our subscribers, that'll be one of the things that I share.
And this is on GymnasticBodies?
GymnasticBodies, yeah.
I am embarrassed that I'm not on your thing.
You should be embarrassed, John.
I should be embarrassed.
Yeah, we'll go to confession later.
Oh, you're Catholic too, huh?
Well, no, but I'll speak up for you to the Father. He didn't mean it. Cut him a break. But I think that's the sweet spot, because part of it is, the phenotype for being an athlete. So if we look at Klokov, everyone's going to go, there are short athletes and there are tall athletes.
Sure.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I think you have athletes that are long limb and a short torso.
Sure.
And you have athletes that have short limbs and a longer torso. And you can't train them the same.
Mm-hmm.
You can't train them the same. And the response to stimuli is very different. So someone who has shorter arms, they're going to get really good hypertrophy from any rep. But someone who has that short torso, the torso is going to respond well to really intense low rep work, but the arms aren't. Not for someone with long arms. For them, we kind of have to pivot. So I learned that the hard way. Was a warm-up for our athletes used to be several times a week weighted rope climb. And then some friends of mine were doing real well. Some of the Russians in that, they were doing on a 7-meter rope, 3 laps. So up, down, up, down, up, down, get in the back of the line. So 3 times, so 3 by 3. Do it as a warm-up. So not conditioning, but just warming up to get ready to train. Do it in the beginning of the workout and then do it as a cool down. The arms exploded. So so the arms, they're an endurance muscle. They're an endurance muscle, and they thrive on this. The torso, depending on the length of the torso, you're going to have to adjust. Like if you look at Mike, was it Phelps? He's got a funny build.
Yeah.
He's got these tiny little legs.
But huge feet.
Long
arms.
Long arms, long torso. And he would have been just a terrible athlete at anything except swimming,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so what we kind of learned is that there are some really beneficial things that can be done from weight. So I never took Jefferson curl, for example. I never took Jefferson's past body weight for my guys. But then now I've got some students who are getting up to body weight and a half, double body weight. I was like, and then we start spending time, and it occurs to me that the one thing gymnastics does better than anyone else is training the shoulders as a ball and socket joint. Rotation, rotator cuff. So, basically, if you can hold a 20 kilo bar, a regular bar, 45 pound bar, hands slightly wider than the shoulder, and you can do dislocates, you really can't make your rotators healthier than that. If you can build up to that, that's going to let you hang on the rings and just roll. And interestingly, in Japan, they understand this to where unless you can do 5 reps of that full body weight hanging, so your rotators are that mobile and that strong, right, not brittle, they don't even let you swing on rings. Mm-hmm. Not all the programs, but some of the juniors. And what we find here in the States is we start them swinging right away, and it's kind of like those kipping pullups, right, from CrossFit, to where you hit the bottom of a ring swing 7 to 10 times body weight. Yeah. And so some track coaches I'll listen to, and they'll say, if we do triple jump, it's 23 times body weight, 14 to 23, depends on who's getting measured. We can only do, 5 of those in a workout, maybe only 3. We got to shut it down.
Sure.
It's like, well, guys, we do 14 to 23 times every single time we tumble. Every day in, day out, for years. And so, I didn't understand why people had to train to run. I didn't understand, right? Because you run, you're only hitting a few times body weight. So I had a crush on a girl. So I'd go out and run with the elite track people, their workouts, their speed, their 400 meter repeats, everything. Never trained a day in my life. I didn't understand why, but it was because I was so strong from tumbling. And just by accident, I had done the 2 gymnastic events that make you the strongest, tumbling and rings. So my upper body was getting 7 to 10 times body weight every single day for hours. My legs were getting the same. And then I used to train in the gym with the big guys, not quite your size, but because we all use the same weight. And I thought at the time, it was just because, I'm God's gift, not realizing I just had really great fascia and connective tissue from having been a gymnast.
Sure.
But the durability on that window is like 10 years. before it starts to. That was the thing that annoys me the most from cancer is all the treatments degraded connective tissue. Mm-hmm. And now I know what it feels like, to be a normal human.
Oh, look at you coming down from your ivory tower.
I really don't like it, dude. I just like it. My fingers were so bad after all the treatments and that it took me a year and a half to get back to a single pull-up. Just the fingers couldn't take it. And it was just like that kind of wrapped in, this new hybrid system is how much I'd taken for granted all that athleticism from connective tissue, and then imagine that's me as a 135-pound athlete. Now apply that to someone who's 200, 220.
Sure.
Oh my gosh. The only one I'd seen come close was Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
Where everyone else I'd watched, they get stronger and they'd always reach this point where performance dropped.
Yeah.
And his didn't. I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's strong.
Strong, but he's still quick. He's still agile.
Dude, that one where he jumped backwards in this, it's
100%. And I don't see that a lot. I think there's an overemphasis on raw strength and not enough, and I'll qualify it, not enough is it improving performance. If as long as it's improving performance, get as strong as you want.
Yeah.
Get as strong as you want. But the second you're slower, the second you jump less,
or
the second you're more brittle.
Or it just looks bad.
Yeah.
I remember.
You can tell someone with a good eye knows. Yeah. What we look at as graceful is just kind of the removal of all these unnecessary
or how
movements.
they move through space.
Exactly right.
One of the ones we found is when people do a lot of strength training, if they don't continue to sprint, then almost the strength in the body, like they don't learn how to move their body through space. Yeah. So one of the fundamental programs we have for our beginners is called Bedrock, and there's a sprinting component. And people are always like, "Oh, I don't have time to sprint." I'm like, "Do it in a separate workout. You don't have to do it right after, but you have to go out and sprint. If you don't keep running, then this is going to be," and I hate the term non-functional mass because I think it's fair. Yeah, but they just end up and we ran into this. As we were trying to put on excess body weight, I remember I was 165 pounds and I needed to be 200. And as I was eating and lifting weights and putting on body weight, we were still running and conditioning.
There you go.
And so I never felt like I lost athleticism. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden now I'm like, go from 165 when I'm 14 and now all of a sudden I'm 18 to 285 pounds. And like I didn't feel different, but we never stopped running and sprinting and changing direction.
That impact. So I noticed, I look at a lot of sprint training and I notice they're probably the sport outside gymnastics that's the most focused on plyometrics.
Yeah.
Plyometrics constantly.
Well, there's like rigidity in the ankle and there's also tendon stiffness. So like how fast, like you can put it up and come off the ground. One of my, I was telling the guy on one of the podcasts recently, the reason I like jiu-jitsu, this is so funny, is we have these huge gymnastics mats, right? And we do jits on these kind of like, there's a little bit of give. Mm-hmm. But before practice for warm-up, we always run. Okay. And so what I do is I sprint as fast as I can, plant, and I come back this way. And every day that I sprint, I think like, not today, old age. And there are people like, why do you run so hard? Why do you sprint? I'm like, because I can.
100%.
And I'm barefoot. I got a little bit of give, so I can feel like a little bit of that spring superpower and a little bit of faster turnover, and I can run as fast as I can. And it's what I enjoy most. Sure. Like, I was class. I'm like, I got to sprint today.
Good.
And it's one of those things where I know that like one day I will not be able to, or maybe hopefully I never.
Not to the same degree.
Or maybe it never leaves.
But always, sure.
But it's funny to see people that haven't sprint and to watch people kind of jog and they kind of do this. And I basically put my foot in the ground and try to go as fast as I can from point A to point B.
I got froggy a couple weeks ago. I said, well, I'm feeling good. My VO2 max been going good for a few months. Cancer's in the rear view. Time to start adding some plyos. Beat me up, dude. Beat me up. Like I had taken for granted how strong our feet used to be.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay. Older now. I'm 62 now.
Yeah. So
I was like, okay, well, obviously the plyos need to be in, but I'm going to have to reintroduce them gradually because my arches were not happy.
That weakening of the feet is amazing.
Yeah.
Like I mean, that's why I walk around barefoot all the time. I mean, everything we do is like, I train barefoot, constantly stretching my feet, working on splaying the toes. There was a podiatrist my rookie year in the NFL, a guy named Dr. Cohen, and I have high arches. And he looked at my feet and he's like, two things.
That's a big sign of really good athleticism.
I like to believe so. But
it is. Absolutely. I've never seen anyone who's a great jumper that didn't have one. I'll take that back. I've seen one athlete with a great vertical that didn't have great arches.
Oh.
Yeah.
So he looked at my feet and he goes, oh, I can make you orthotics, or let me teach you how to take care of your feet. So he showed me how to kind of stretch and mobilize and do stuff. So every night before I go to bed, I kind of like do a bunch of the stretches, work on my toes, and I've never had any foot issues. Okay. So I've been very lucky in that way.
That's huge. Feet are huge. The Russians were big on the feet, constantly fussing. You're not using your feet. You're not using your feet. You're not using your feet. So over and over. And it takes a while to the uneducated eye to look. They look exactly the same.
Yeah.
But after a while, you can see the details. You go, they're right. They're totally right. They're totally right. I couldn't put a percentage on it. I know they could. We had one team that we had brought over that brought their own doc. And like I call it Russian medical massage. They hate that term. So it's not Russian, it's not medical, it's just massage, but it's totally different than what we do.
Really? How so?
So an example is Alan's at OU, Oklahoma, and they don't do a good job at my level. They don't do a good job of joint prep. And TL junction is in the middle of the back where the thoracic comes into the lumbar. Yeah. And as gymnasts, right, with that rotation and that sideward flexion, it needs special attention, right? Or it starts getting sore, it gets overpowered, right? The lats are kind of coming in, the erectors are coming up. You kind of got to work on it. They'd been trying for months. Nothing. He's having a hard time. I forget which year it was when he was there. And so my expense, I shot one of our staff that was trained in Russian medical massage out, fix it in a weekend. It's, I don't even know how to describe it.
Painful.
It's painful. It's different than art, than active release. They're really good at working on the muscle bellies. So, for example, I had one athlete with, and I can find out, there used to be a good guy in Scottsdale. I had an athlete with an issue on his wrist, and instead of working on his wrist, they worked on his forearm up by the elbow. Oh. And I watched the wrist go from this to just, wow. And I was like, or we'll take shoulders, for example. I spent decades, we got to increase shoulder flexion. And kind of the old truism, you don't teach well what you're naturally good at. And I have naturally really good shoulders. And so I always Alan is a beast, but his flexion was lacking. My opinion, flexion was lacking. And what I finally learned, and part of it is, the connect, everything wrapping around and going under the humerus. It's just 7 different attachments, the biggest pain in the ass. But if you don't work pec minor, and you don't work the insertion of the bicep, and you don't work the lat and where the lat comes around, you can't even get into working shoulder flexion. And so I remember after I figured that out and started getting good results, thinking of all the decades I had wasted by trying to work shoulder flexion, but almost addressing the symptom instead of the root cause, because I didn't know what the root cause was. It's a little bit like I had always thought, you want to work the lats, you're going to do chins, you're going to do rope climbs. That's your best thing. No, it's not, because that's not what the lats are designed to do. Just start from the hip, comes across the hip, hits to the spine, shoots up the spine, comes across to the scap. At the same time, we have all hitting through the ribs, wraps around up through the armpit, into the arm. There's only one thing that hits that perfectly, and that's a one-arm dumbbell row. There's nothing else where you get that full stretch on the lat, that full contraction. If I do a 2-arm, it cuts my stretch short. Yeah. Because I can't come across midline. Yeah. I was pissed when I finally figured that out, because also if I'm doing lots of chins, I'm not working that lat like I should, that keeps everything seated in a healthy manner in the shoulders.
Yeah.
So we would see gymnasts over the years, they would get up on P's and try to do, bodyweight rows, which are fine. I don't want to denigrate those. Those are fine. But depending on your level of strength, you can't load it enough to make a meaningful impact. So Ming Young, little guy. I mean, gymnasts are small to start with. This guy was like 112 pounds. I don't know how tall he was. I had a guy that I would chat with who was in the gym he was training in China. He had a 286-pound bench at 112 and world champion on rings. But what did he spend his time on? He spent his time on things like those rows, just trying to hold his physical structure together. Because in that small frame, he was just, optimized for as much power as that little frame could produce. So, we're the money makers. So it kind of like, wow, all these years I should have been doing rows. And then that means I'm going to use the rope climbs for more of a therapeutic. Because what I found is the stronger you are, you're going to have some regular sessions with higher rep work just for joint health, because the connective tissue doesn't have a circulatory system. Right? It doesn't have its own veins, like muscle tissue has its own capillaries through it. Connective tissue doesn't. So the way you flush that is movement or muscle contraction around it. So we found is at least once a week, once every 2 weeks, you got to do some stuff with some high rep. Just for health. Otherwise, in my opinion, over time, you're just kind of gradually starving that connective tissue, just kind of starving, because it's there, it's gone. It didn't get flushed enough. So I learned that from the Bulgarian coach, from Rumen. He, bit of a wild man. So he would attend all the surgeries and kind of had carte blanche in Bulgaria. He'd go in the operating rooms doing his thing. And Rumen's the one who had taught me that if you want to prevent Achilles ruptures, you have to do like you had. You have to do, well, yours was gastroc, not Achilles, but you have to do high rep calf work. Yeah. And so what Rumen had us doing was 150 reps in a set, toe forward, toe out, toes inward, done. I learned my knee protocols from him for meniscus and ACL and MCL, patella tendon. And it's all kind of contrary to what we were taught. Because like, for example, you got really great at squat. But notice it wasn't your prime mover that time that went. It was when your foot hit a seam and it went sideways, it took out the ACL. And that prime mover wasn't able to give any assistance for it. And that's kind of what I learned with the adults as we were working with, was the stronger they had gotten in the weight room without the compensatory mobility work to support it when it goes off track, they could kind of pull themselves apart. Yeah. They were so strong. So it was just kind of for the SEAL program. And we won't call it that now. I just have different templates. It's grown because theirs was primarily mobility. Because I didn't want them, same with our guys come in, they get excited, they feel good, and they want to stop everything they've been doing. Yeah. And I always want them to not do that. I said, guys, you're world class for a reason. Yeah. We need
it's a supplement.
Yeah, we've got to cherry pick. Maybe there's some things you're doing that you don't need, but maybe there's something you're doing that's critical to your success. Yeah. And we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so I like the row. I really like floor presses. Yeah. I like floor presses. You got that
from Pavel, huh?
I don't know.
He was a big floor.
Is Pavel big on the floor press?
I think he had a program that was like Power to the People or something that was like deadlifting and floor press. Okay. I personally always liked floor press for the fact that, one, I felt like I could coach the bench press better. Okay. Like bring it back and with the elbows and being able to vertical forearms. So when we would go teach the CrossFit football, most of the CrossFit gyms didn't have benches. So we would have to use the floor press. And actually, just out of, the mother of invention is, necessity. But I viewed that, I was like, holy shit, I can actually coach the bench press better from the floor press. So I started putting a lot more floor pressing in my own program. And, I have a video somewhere floating around of me floor pressing 500 pounds.
See, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I think it if someone has short arms, short limbs, they're kind of built to bench, right? They have that restricted range of motion already.
Yeah.
And so the floor press kind of takes it. If I have long arms, the floor press mitigates that issue.
Yeah. And also when they bring the bar down, you know, the ability to keep the bar and like the wrist and everything stacked.
Yes.
So then they're here and they drive up a post from you. Watch people kind of get in these weird positions.
Did you like doing Swiss bars with it? Did you do a lot of Swiss bar work?
Yeah, like a football bar, like neutral grip. I do like a neutral grip bench.
Okay.
But I also too, when I use a straight bar, I kind of I don't like the way people put the bar in their hand. They do it this way.
That's kind of scary.
I always do is I always kind of spin
roll it a little bit,
and it comes across my hand here, and then I wrap my thumb. And what I realize, it's stacked much better over my wrist, opposed from here where I'd see people come back. So there's like a structural anatomical position that you only figure out if you bench heavy. You know, I in college was trying to bench 500 pounds and, you know, continue to bench well over 500 for a long time. And there's only one way to do it. And the people that don't do it properly, that get real strong, end up blowing pecs and hurting themselves. Knock on wood, I've never.
How about what's your maintenance percentage of body weight you find that's just your body likes it day in, day out? For in terms, are you still doing 400? What are you benching? 3?
I can still bench 400 pounds. Okay. You know, like for me, I don't do as.
That's over one. Is that about 1 3/4?
Yeah, I weigh about 270. So. Yeah, where it figures it out. But I can still go bench 405. Like, so I have some basic strength negotiables, bench 400, squat 500, and pull 585. Okay. And like, you know, there's still like
everything else fills in around those cracks.
Yeah. And still like I did, 20 bodyweight dips is usually pretty good too. I know I can break those out for sets of 3 sets of 10, 20. But I feel, and I'm not a huge lover of the deadlift. I like RDLs.
Yeah,
and I do a lot more RDLs. I'll periodically pull from the floor just as a strength check. Okay. But similar to you, I like a lot of one arm rows. I also like them on the chest support. We'll set up like an incline bench, and I'll support my chest because I found that even if I put my hand here, I kind of use a little bit of
English.
A little bit of English. That's a good way of putting it. But I like supported.
You've seen the Chinese Olympic lifters doing that ballistic row.
Yeah.
I never liked that one, but they're God, they do some weight.
Yeah. I was watching those guys do GHD back extensions with 100 kilos, like those guys are strong. Like the high pulls and that, they do high rep bodybuilding, but they do it, I think.
What do you think of that wide grip high pull they do? It's almost ballistic coming up for the high rep.
Yeah. And it's weird that they dump their elbows and they pull this way.
They do.
Yeah, there's a lot of intelligence in that.
I look at it. I go both ways. I'm like, gosh, I just don't know. But we don't clean. We don't hang clean. So I was like, that was on my list to talk about with you.
It kind of looks like the Chinese went to Russia and took a lot of the Russian Olympic lifting and the gymnastics and kind of like combined it into their Olympic lifting team. Okay. Because those guys do. I was watching their warm ups. They do some basic gymnastic stuff, but so do the wrestling guys.
I love that. Yeah, all the Dagestani guys.
Yeah,
they were swinging high bar before they go to work out.
Yeah, we had Carolyn Webster on the podcast, who's a gymnastics coach, and she has all this like tumbling and does these guys are there is a very universal template for athleticism and moving through space that involves, that's why I always recommend for any of the parents, I get asked a lot of questions on athletic development. I'm like, swimming 100%. And gymnastics.
I would swim from birth to about 2, maybe 18 months, but 2, then go into gymnastics. Then you have to be a high level. Well, and just play and do that till 5 or 6 and then go do what you want.
Well, that's what I did. I took my kids to gymnastics until they told me to not bring the kids anymore. So my one daughter, Jamie, grew tall. And so all of a sudden they were like, oh, she has to be in the fitness. And then my daughter, Killy, they were trying to get her to go into these like kind of club traveling, and she had to go on the competitive team.
Yeah, they pushed that too hard.
And it was like 5 days a week and then travel every single weekend. And I got 2 other kids. And so that kind of, just negated.
They take advantage. What they should do, there's a program now called Excel where I think the kids are prohibited to do like only 9 hours a week, maybe 12. And for 90% of your kids, if not higher, that's appropriate.
Yeah.
That's where they should be. but they sell it. That's why those cowgirls were upset. So they'd been told, you're going to be an Olympian. You're going to be an Olympian. And then you're not. Instead of, hey, we're going to enjoy the process. We're going to bust our butt. We'll just see how far you could go.
So one of the male gymnasts, this guy Puff, who we used to hang with, who's an Asian dude, I would always be like, what's wrong with these girls? He's like, can you imagine like realizing that you're washed up at age 20 and that, and that even though that was your best, it wasn't good enough to be the best. And now here you are just fucking springing around on rings to try to get a college education. And like that, he's like, they're the most bitter girls he'd ever been around. And he's like, don't mind them. Shame. And you know what? It was true.
Such a shame. It was.
And then that weird shit came out where that doctor was touching all those girls.
So we used to.
I was like, fuck,
when a guy goes to training camp, we have a good time. The girls had to go every month. And so we had 2 going out to training camp. They'd come back from camp and would be happy. And I'm just doing physical prep, some tramp and some tumbling. I'm just doing a little bit. They'd come back and they'd be happy for about 2 weeks. And then they'd start getting uptight because it's time getting shorter and shorter and shorter. They got to go out to camp again. Consistent every month in and month out like that. And it was extremely, I don't know about Nassar, the doc's name, but even Caroli. It was just survival of the fittest. So you would come in that day and you had to demonstrate readiness. And if you blew something, Caroli, especially Marta, was going to be all over your ass. And you were going to do 30 reps, and they were just going to basically, you would either fix it or you were going to break. And it was constant. And interesting that the reason Nastia did well later is Liukin, her dad, Valeri, he would always say, she's hurt, she can't right now. She wasn't hurt. He was just smart. He was just protecting her from that. But that's, they were looking for athletes that couldn't be broken because they weren't technically that great. They just had athletes that survived. They had athletes that, you just beat them up, smack them around, and they just keep coming back. And what normally happens in an Olympic cycle is what you should do, just as a regular nationals, we start preparing. Nationals is over, we've got a year, we start then. For an Olympics, you start 4 years out, and then everything should be dialed in a perfect world, 18 months out. In an okay world, 12 months out. But that's never what happens with the majority of coaches. What they'll do is they'll screw around, they'll do okay. It'll be 3 months out, maybe 6, and suddenly everyone's going ape shit.
Yeah.
And they all get hurt. They get overuse injuries. And so I'd always tell my athletes, just be last man standing. They're all going to freak out. They're not going to plan their cycles well. They're all going to go down. And I've seen them pick people. They said, we will never pick this athlete ever. Well, all your favorites are broken. Just like this last Olympic, I think the girls had 3 major injuries at trials.
Yeah.
All top 3 girls. Gone.
Yeah.
Oh. And you end up with a little 16-year-old that makes team.
Yeah. Because
their top girls, weren't. So we've kind of gone the other way too, where they went from being way too harsh to, is it okay if we work hard? Is that okay? Can we be buddies? I'm like, well, that's not going to work. That's not going to work because they have to accept the fact we can work hard without it being harsh.
Yeah.
Right? Without being denigrating, without trying to cut you down,
Yeah, I don't know why there's that. That's, I don't know, maybe, I hate to use the term old school, but I don't know, maybe that's the way that the only way people know how to get results.
I think it's a lack of knowledge because you notice if a coach is doing low level, they're calm, they're patient, they're progressive. But as the coach starts getting near the edge of their technical ability, now they start getting more frustrated. They get more short-tempered. They're more demanding. I've seen coaches, we'll go harder. And I'd turn to my athletes and I'd smile and said, really, was that a technical? Did that really help you there? If I just tell you, go harder, not shift your weight, not slow this down, not change this angle. Oh, we have to make this adjustment. I'll just tell you to go harder. Will that fix everything? And they're just cracking up.
Yeah.
So part of it is, the coach, either through, and it happens, people don't like to realize it, but not everyone possesses world-class talent. And sometimes you hit your ceiling.
Yeah.
And I wish when I was 20, to go back where you had started, that someone would have come to me and had told me, everything you're worried about will resolve itself. It will turn out the way you want the closer you come to becoming world-class. Everything will take the recognition, the money, the opportunities. The closer you come to being world-class at what you love, everything will resolve. So that my job as a 20-year-old is stop trying to act like you're that guy right now.
Yeah.
Nose to grindstone, master your craft, become better and better and better. And better. So we had some guys who in Arizona were like the big Zillow for realty. And they asked if they could come by and visit. One of the guys was a friend of mine. So I said, absolutely. And they wanted bells and whistles for peak performance. And the first question I asked them, are you the best realtors in the country? He said, what do you mean? I said, are you the best realtors? Are you so good that there's no question that you are the best? Because that everything else is just a supplement. And so what I think I'm kind of excited about the time right now is a buddy of mine is a founder of a $150 million company, education, great hearts. They've got like 40 campuses. They're classical education, really great. We were visiting, and his concern was, AI is going to lead to this drop in quality. And I was of the opposite. I said, actually, I'm excited the other way. Because I said, what's going to happen is AI is simply going to copy mediocre material.
Yeah.
And I think what it's going to do...
All it can do is aggregate what's out there.
100%. I said, I think what it's going to do is, because we've kind of went from internet starts and everyone's happy. And then that went to platforms. And we kind of rode the platform thing. And then everything went into the apps. And the apps kind of became the wrapping on the Christmas present. I can do these video effects. I can have this many views. But there wasn't content for most of the people. And I think now what's come around is now quality of information matters. Because everyone with technology has access to all the really cool bells and whistles.
Sure.
So now you either know what you're doing, you're great at it, or you're not. And I think, hopefully, we're going to start seeing that recognized. I think over the next few years, we're going to see a lot of the influencers closing up shop.
Yeah.
The plagiarizers.
Well, how many people are really doing original information? And on top of it, it's not like, we're creating anything. I always joke that we stand on the shoulders of giants.
100%.
Being able to aggregate. And that's why I've always been big on,
100%.
Hey, this is where I learned this. This is where, whereas a lot of people are like, I developed this information.
I developed it. Oh, God.
And I hear
it drives me crazy.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like there's no new movement under the sun. And it actually gives you credibility to show where it comes from. But
you were in a barn in Iowa, and this just came to you, huh?
Yeah.
So it was a new virgin birth. Okay, great. Yeah, I'm buying that.
Last one. What's something you wish more coaches or athletes understood about longevity and training?
Got to build physical structure. Got to be. So as my athletes came up, we spent literally 50% of our time on physical prep. Literally 50%. And I didn't realize when I was young how good a job they had done. So we had Mas Watanabe had come in to work with the girls. And while he was there, he's watching my guys. And he comes over, and it was good and it was bad. It was kissy, and it was I got my ass kicked. The kissy was, holy shit. I have never seen a group of athletes this strong in my life. And he'd been, our top guy for decades in the US since like 1970. And then he chewed my ass. He was like, and why aren't you pushing them harder on these skills? I was like, well, I feel at their age, ring giants, for example, at 8, 9, I really don't want them being exposed to 10 times body weight. And he's like, for anybody else, yes. For your guys, no. And so he was kind of like, it's not so much now. It is and it isn't. It is a big problem to maximize their strength prior to puberty. Because in terms of athleticism.
So this is the priming the pump. I think that I read about this in the Russian stuff, that there was the kids that were exposed to physical training, like difficult physical training pre-puberty, gained muscle and strength at a much more dramatic rate than the kids that didn't.
They did.
Yeah.
And then the issue, what happens is now they hit a growth spurt. And now everything gets incredibly tight because they didn't focus on mobility first and then do good basics for strength. So now you've got these athletes that have painful joints everywhere. So they kind of created their own problem where do your basics, do your mobility. So like if someone, it's not sexy and people don't like it. And my college coach did me just a tremendous, he didn't mean to do me a favor, but my ring handstand was weak. So in order to get me out of his hair, he said, when we go to rings, you're going to ring handstand. And I'm not going to see you again ever until you have a good ring handstand. And it turns out that a good handstand on rings is the gateway exercise for all other advanced ring strength. Now, he didn't mean it. Right? And I got really great at it, and everything just started clicking. And it came from that ring handstand, right? Because if you can do a ring handstand, so your lats are mobile, your shoulders are strong, your rotator cuff is strong, your forearms are flexible, and while you're in the handstand, you're actually laying on your bicep. So people don't understand is they think bicep is bicep. Straight arm ring strength is because of the long head of the bicep. Right? So you'll see if someone tears that long head, they're not going to be good at throwing anymore. Right? So you'll see a lot of docs who, if they're not, haven't been athletic or don't understand, oh, you tore your long head? It's no big deal. It'll look funny, but don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's not going to bother you functionally unless you're a thrower, unless you're a gymnast, right? And so that long head, that ring handstand nurtured all that other development because I didn't ever train. So because of gymnastics, I went right to double body weight dead. I went right to, I have long arms. I never did better than like body weight and a half, a little over that on bench, but I went right to body weight on military. Now, what it doesn't do, I will say this, what the plyometric work doesn't do well is hypertrophy.
Yeah. And
hypertrophy, my opinion, is like armor.
Yeah.
Armor, it protects
the more
you.
muscle you can carry, the longer. I mean, if you look at, those actuary charts, the person that maintains muscle mass the longest is the one that lives the longest.
Yeah. I'd like to, and I don't know how to do it. I'd like to see that muscle mass kind of married to a degree of athleticism. Maybe the VO2 max is enough. Yeah. So that we've got some fascial development, some connective tissue, just because I've seen adults who are strong, but when they try, so that first seminar I ever did with adults, I tried to do some introductory plyo stuff like I do with a 4 or 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Dropping like flies. And the stronger they were, the faster they went down. Little baby stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, you think about like let's say for a squat, for example, right? Like most people squat slow.
Sure.
Right. Like they're not dynamic in nature. I mean, there's no way to jump up on a box slow. There's no way to clean a weight slow.
100%.
There's no way to, if you're sprinting, most people, like, especially in the CrossFit thing, like, the run is the recovery. You're going to do this in 400-meter runs or this.
100%.
So we came in and we started teaching people how to sprint mechanics to change direction. We realized that they had not done any of the preparatory work that we needed. And all of a sudden, we start doing some banded resistance sprints, just trying to teach them, the angle to fall and chest angle and high knees and some of these other things. Okay. And fucking imploding to the point where I'm like, you don't even have to sprint hard. All you got to do is just give me high knees and big arm swing and just drive the band. And it was, to the point where we had to just end up taking it out of the seminar. Just because people would come in and we'd ask people, like, how many people here are ready to sprint? How many people have sprinted in the program? Have you done any prep? Oh yeah, this. And all of a sudden, you're watching people roll up calves, pull hamstrings, have all these issues. To the point where I was like, dude, we're going to this is scary. Yeah. Just realizing. And they're like, I train every day. I do this stuff. I'm like, there's a difference between what you're doing at the relative intensity of what you're training and the ballistic nature of what I'm asking you to do. Yes. And doing 50 box jumps on a 20-inch box isn't.
That year Greg had them do box jumps paired with deadlift. Yeah. But how many Achilles tears?
It was a lot. Toes to bar and deadlift were the two that if you married, you were guaranteed to have fucking everybody on the floor with SI problems.
There was a year they did deadlift and box jump. And it was like 7 tears at least. It might have been 9, but I know 7 for sure. And it's not like it's a big deal. It's just they'd never trained for plyometric, that ballistic impact. I did a seminar at Poliquin headquarters in Rhode Island for dynamic strength. I spent all day doing the prep, doing the drills, and some of these guys were beasts. Yeah. We got to the plyo. Our intro plyo is, because there's a difference between jumping and rebounding. Yeah. Right. So I put them in a push-up position, bounce, locked arms, bounce. So I get down and I show them I'm bouncing up and down, and I'm old. I said, guys, just bounce. I said, wow, okay. We should have started long ago, because that's where the athleticism comes from. Sure. Is that the ability, because we call it ballistic, but kind of the playing field is ballistic. I have to absorb it and I have to produce it. Yeah. Whether it's impact, being run over by another rhinoceros, right? Or I'm just changing direction. Yeah. Look at Barry Sanders' knees in slow motion.
Well, and what's interesting is if I'll go back to jiu-jitsu a little bit, is if you don't have to play on your feet, you can kind of play on these ground positions, you can get away with a lot of dysfunction. Okay. And that was what was interesting, is seeing a lot of just people walking and seeing a lot of the dysfunction, and you're like, man, if this thing became like, if you were going to get down and we were going to hit each other, or if you were in judo or something, these problems become very apparent. But because we're kind of in this, on the ground, you're using the ground as kind of gravity and this force, and you're able to kind of manipulate and move your body, a navicular drop, or, a valgus knees, or, a janky hip, or, shoulders that don't do something, you can kind of hide these things a little bit. And I think that's what's interesting, especially with it. But I also think it's kind of a wrestling deal. So I'm always amazed when people are so beat up from it, oh, I'm so sore. I'm like, I don't necessarily get that.
You watch any of the Greco-Roman guys?
Yeah, those dudes fucking pick each other up and smash each other. That
physical I'm in awe of those guys. I think that might be your best overall athletic prep. Yeah. For just strange positions, great musculature, powerful.
What was the Russian, Krellin? The guy.
Gosh, I'm so bad at their names.
The guy that would just scoop people up.
Oh, yes, the monster who got second.
Experiment? Is that what they call? No, what did they call him?
What's his name?
Yeah, Krellin.
Begins with a K, right?
Yeah. Here, I'll put it in Russian. Greco.
I remember reading some people that were like.
Yeah,
Carolyn.
Carolyn. Alexandre Carolyn.
Ballet, reads the classics, and then breaks people in half.
Yeah, they called him the Russian Bear, Russian King Kong, Alexander the Great, the Experiment. That's how I know his name. Yeah, he 6'6", 285. and would just absolutely fucking smash people.
People were trying to lay down because silver is fine.
Yeah.
Because at least I won't be dead.
He was a 12-pound baby.
I wonder if his mom ever spoke to him again.
I was a 10.5-pound baby.
Is your mom still mad?
No, she had me in about 30 minutes.
Really?
They told her if they gave her any drugs, she wouldn't have the baby fast and it would be over. So she said no drugs, and she just bit down and pushed me out in 30 minutes.
How big's your mom?
My mom's probably 5'6", 5'7". That's
pretty awesome. What was her sports background?
I don't know what she did. My mom grew up on a ranch, so I think she's like cowboy stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, my mom is just inherently a tough person.
Okay.
But yeah, she told the story about her water broke and she had me at 7:30 in the morning, and my dad came in and said, "Hey, if I can get her out of here before noon, can I pay for a half day?" Cheap ass. And so my mom came home. My grandmother was there. I guess she put me down and then went to the grocery store because I got two older brothers, and the doctor who had delivered the baby that morning saw her at the grocery store, and he was like, "Didn't you just have like a 10-pound baby this morning?" She's like, "Yeah, I got some kids to feed. Like, get the fuck out of here, you know?"
Wow.
Just tough woman.
All right, so I'm officially a wimp.
Yeah, my mom's tough. She's 86.
86?
Yeah, still walks like 13,000 steps a day, drives, takes no medication.
Where's she living at?
Newport Beach. So she lives close to my
She's in
brothers.
California.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, my mom is, I keep joking with her.
I was picturing her up in a mountain on a ranch.
No, she grew up in Western Canada, grew up on a ranch in Western Canada.
Okay.
And, but yeah, I tell my mom that people like her live to be 200. She's like, "Fuck you," and hangs up on me. So she's feisty as shit. But she's a trip, man. Like my dad ended up passing away from cancer 7 years ago.
Sorry to hear that. What kind of cancer?
Stomach and liver. He stage 4 cancer, thought he just had bronchitis and an ulcer. And they kept telling him, "Oh, you got fluid on your lungs and you got an ulcer." So they kept giving him this stuff. And then he tried his last case. He was a trial attorney for 55 years. Okay. Tried his last case on like the 16th of December, and then was feeling sick, called us on the 26th, and we took him out to go see Tom out in Arizona. Found out he had stage 4 in his liver and his stomach, and he was gone on February 28th.
Okay.
So he did exactly what he wanted. He wanted to work up to the day he died.
You can't do better than that.
Yeah. And he was gone like this. And it was, mean, it's, as you know, with cancer, I mean, seeing that, like, it's one thing to deal with
it. It's the withering away that's the worst. Yeah.
Well, so he was big dude. He was 6'3", like 240.
Okay.
And in that 2 months, I remember I took him to treatment and I had to help him weigh in. He was 165 pounds.
I dropped to 114.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I brought him out in the wheelchair and I scooped him up and I did like a one arm kind of lunge into place. And I realized, I was like, man, I just did like a single leg one leg squat with my dad, and very gently placed him in the seat of the car. And I was like, shit, man.
Yeah.
It's a motherfucker.
I thought the cancer was way harder on my family than me.
Yeah.
And it was not like it was a cakewalk for me, but all I had to do was die. They had to be helpless during the process.
Well, like, with my wife's deal, my wife's an amazing person. I love her to death, but also, like, I got 3 kids. You can't leave me. Like that.
I hear that one. Yeah. I hear that one.
It's like, I will do, I can do this, but like, I don't want to do this.
I hear that a lot.
Like we got, 3 kids that need a mom.
They don't understand. My wife will go, "You guys will be fine with them." I said, "Babe, you have no clue."
Yeah.
The last thing the girls need is to spend the rest of their life with a Neanderthal. I said, "We need you here to civilize things, sweetie." Yes.
Well, I realized my wife's attention to detail and all this other stuff, like, just like women are wired so different. And, and like, that's what, like, the yin and the yang. And that's what's 100%. Always so fascinating to me.
100%.
Especially with, like, kind of like the transgender thing. And I'm like, I have no desire to be a woman. Like, what they go through in this whole thing. Like, I'm glad that there's somebody who fills that role, because I fill a different one.
I couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it either.
I couldn't do it. Not a prayer. And it's interesting that the two of us fulfill such different roles. Yeah. I'm the playful one. I make things fun. At the same time, I'm the disciplinarian. And then I do those two extremes, and she's everything in the middle that keeps everything even keel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Blessed.
Yeah. Well, it's, my parents were married for like, 56 years or something, or 54 years. And, my dad passed away. Okay. And now here my mom is, and she's like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And so she's been in this kind of funk. I keep joking with her. I'm like, Mom, you've been in a funk for like 7 years. And she's like, well, your dad left me. I'm like, he didn't leave you. He didn't leave you. He died of cancer. And she's like, and then she's
only a woman could look at it that way.
and then she's
Bastard left me.
He didn't take care of himself. He ate he didn't work out. He didn't she goes through this whole list of all the ways that he didn't fucking do this. And I'm like, Mom, he lived to be 80. He lived a great life. And she's like, yeah, but what about, and it's this, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different response. I feel like talking to my mom is like we have these same conversations, and I'll talk to my brother, and he's like, you're never going to win. You know this, right? You've known this woman your whole life, and I just hope that she finds some purpose outside, because
families are so spread now. Imagine how much happier if it was more like the old days and your brother's here, she's here.
Well, my brothers live like a quarter mile away. So
nice.
and my
families.
Yeah. And my brother's 2 young kids. So grandma raises them, and then, my brother. So everybody's there. We're the only ones.
Moaning, but overall she's in a good situation.
Yeah. But we also moved here, which of course I got to hear about, you moved away. You took my granddaughters. I'm like, you can get on a plane. I'll buy you a ticket. Come visit. The girls would love to see you.
I teased my wife. I said, sweetie, that women outlive men. She's like, yeah. I said, why? It's because men live with women. It's all the stress you guys put on us.
Well, and then my mom's also funny. She's like, God, I was hoping that I'd pass before your dad, so he'd have to deal with all this shit. And
that's what my wife says all the time.
Well, the funnier thing is, so my dad had heard that there was a place that sold food called the grocery store. I just don't think he'd ever been in there. And he sure as hell couldn't cook a meal. No. So the way I learned to cook and barbecue is my dad was so bad at cooking on the barbecue that I started barbecuing about 8 or 9. And so I can make burgers and cook. And I remember my mom being like, you have to learn to cook because you're going to starve. You don't want to be like your father, helpless. So my mom would go back to Canada and go visit her family. And my dad would watch us, and he'd get home. We'd be home after school and be like, Dad, what's for dinner? He's like, you guys want to go get ice cream sundaes? And every night we go out and we get an ice cream sundae because that fucker was lazy and didn't know how to cook. And so I have taken it upon myself to cook and learn to cook and teach my kids to cook.
Very good.
But it's it's just such a different time. My dad would go to work, answering machine, no cell phone, the whole thing. It's just we have such better connectivity, and we're so much 100%. More engaged. I felt like back then it was.
I had a 4-way phone call with all the family this morning.
Yeah,
you couldn't have done something that cool back in the day.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a good segment, dude. That's a good place to end it. Yeah, dude. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you coming out and us connecting.
Hope we had some worthwhile in there. We had a lot of rambling.
It's good. I can see the look on Jacob's face. He's seen some gems. So thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. Another episode of Power Athlete Radio. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by kofi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/power athlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.